The night is quiet and soft, and we drift back thousands of years to a time when the world felt slower, when every rustle of the trees carried mystery. In the valleys of ancient China, there lived a figure remembered with both reverence and affection, Shen Nung, the divine farmer. His name has floated across centuries like steam rising from a warm cup, gently curling, never hurried. The story says that Shen Nan wandered the land, tasting plants, learning their properties, discovering which healed and which harmed. His body was said to be transparent, so that he could see the effects of each plant upon himself. Imagine this: Imogen, old sage, clothed in flowing robes, wandering among bamboo and camellia trees, bending to gather leaves with deliberate care. He carries a simple pot, and when he rests beneath a tree, he boils water over a small flame. The sound of bubbling fills the air, a calm rhythm like a heartbeat. One day, a breeze carried down a handful of delicate green leaves, fluttering softly into his pot. The water shimmered and changed color, a soft gold spreading through the surface. He lifted the vessel to his lips, breathed in its fragrance, and tasted something that was neither bitter nor sweet, but both, layered with warmth. It eased his body, soothed his mind, and refreshed his spirit. In that moment, tea was born, or so the story tells us. Close your eyes for a moment and picture this scene. The warmth of the day is settling into evening. Cicadas sing in the distance, and the leaves overhead sway gently, a rustling lullaby. The pot over the flame hums softly. Steam rises like a veil, and when Shen Nan sips, he does not gulp, but holds the cup near his lips, savoring its scent first, then letting the taste bloom slowly. This is not a hurried drink, not a thirst quencher. It is a discovery and a comfort. Whether this tale is fact or legend hardly matters. What matters is the feeling it leaves us with. That something as simple as a leaf drifting into water could become a companion to humanity for thousands of years. We might think of tea today as ordinary, but if we listen carefully, each cup carries echoes of that ancient valley, that quiet fire, that gentle accident that changed the world of taste forever. Let yourself wander deeper into the life of those early days, when tea was not yet a beverage of ceremony or trade, but a healing leaf. Imagine the people of Shen Nan's time collecting plants in woven baskets, drying them in the sun, sorting them carefully. Some leaves would be used for medicine, ground into powders, mixed with water or broth. Tea leaves, light and curled, would be steeped to calm the stomach, to lift weariness, to bring clarity of thought. The taste then was not the refined matcha or delicate green teas of later dynasties. It was rustic, raw, the essence of the mountain itself captured in the cup. You might picture the liquid as earthy, with notes of smoke from the wood fire, mingling with the freshness of the leaves. Each sip was as much about the sound of the stream where water was drawn, or the warmth of the clay pot held in both hands, as it was about flavor. Think of the quiet ritual of boiling water in those times. Before kettles and porcelain, before silver spoons and glass teapots, there was only clay and fire. The crackle of wood, the hiss of steam escaping, the small bubbles gathering at the bottom of a pot. Sounds are slow and gentle. The same rhythm that would lull someone into rest. Even now, if you close your eyes, you might imagine yourself there, listening not to the noise of cities or machines, but to fire, water, and leaves. Shen Nan's legend tells us that he tasted hundreds of plants in a single day, sometimes poisoned, sometimes healed. Yet with tea, there was no bitterness of harm. Instead, there was clarity. It is said that tea could clear the head, help one see more sharply, think more clearly. Perhaps this is why monks later found it so dear to meditation, and why travelers along long, dusty roads craved it. But in these earliest moments, tea was nothing more than a leaf and water, a comfort discovered almost by chance. Let your imagination soften around the idea of discovery. The world before tea was one where water was plain, unadorned. Then, a leaf gave it color, fragrance, warmth. Imagine the very first people who shared a cup with Shen Nung, sitting around a low fire, their hands wrapped around simple bowls. Their conversation would have been quiet, perhaps little more than murmurs of surprise at the flavor. And yet in that moment of sharing, tea became more than medicine. It became an experience, a small piece of community. The story drifts across centuries, told and retold, embroidered by poets and storytellers, but always carrying the same soft heart. That tea began not in grandeur, not in palaces or courts, but in nature, with a man resting under a tree. This is why, even today, we can sip tea and feel grounded, connected to earth, to water, to air. As we let this story settle, imagine yourself beside Shennan now. The sun is dipping low, the horizon brushed with gold. The shadows of bamboo lean long across the ground. The pot still simmers, the scent of leaves rising steadily. He hands you a cup, warm in your palms. You lift it to your lips and inhale. The fragrance is fresh, grassy, but also deep, like the forest itself. You sip slowly, and for a moment, time stops. Nothing else exists but the warmth in your hands, the breath of steam on your face, the comfort of the present moment. This is how tea began. Not just as a drink, but as a pause. A reminder that life moves slowly, that comfort can be found in small things, and that even in the earliest days of our history, people found ways to rest, to reflect, and to be soothed. Tea carries this memory through every age. And so we begin our journey with Shennan under his tree, a quiet pot bubbling, and the first sip of what would become one of humanity's gentlest treasures. Long after Shennan's first discovery, tea remained for centuries not a daily pleasure, but a trusted remedy, a companion to healing. In the valleys and hills of ancient China, herbal knowledge grew slowly, passed by word of mouth. Written in careful brush strokes on bamboo slips, preserved by healers who listened to the rhythms of the body and the land. Tea was one among thousands of plants. Yet it began to hold a special place because of the way it soothed, not only the stomach but also the spirit. Imagine yourself in a small village some 2,000 years ago. Homes are made of wood and clay, roofs thatched with straw. Smoke drifts gently from cooking fires, and the air carries the scent of herbs drying in bundles under the eaves. A healer moves quietly through her home, stopping to stir a clay jar, to tie another bundle, to check the slow simmer of a pot. On her shelves lie rows of dried roots, barks, seeds, and leaves, each known for a different power. Among them, carefully kept in a basket, are leaves of the tea plant Camellia sinensis. When villagers fall ill with fever or complain of a heavy stomach after too much food, a cup of tea might be offered. The leaves are dropped into water just beginning to steam, the pot covered with a lid of bamboo or clay. The brew is dark, earthy, sometimes a little bitter. The sick drink it slowly, grimacing at the strength, but soon their stomachs ease, their heads feel clearer, and warmth returns to their bodies. It is not magic, but it is a comfort, and comfort is sometimes the first step to healing. The earliest written records of tea describe it in this way, as medicine. In old medical texts, tea was listed alongside ginger, ginseng, and licorice root. It was said to brighten the eyes, lighten the body, clear heat, and relieve drowsiness. Imagine the scene: a scholar bent over a bamboo slip, brush in hand, the scent of ink mixing with the faint fragrance of dried leaves. He writes of tea not as a drink to be shared in laughter, but as a cure, a tool to balance the humors of the body. To restore harmony between the inner self and the outer world, think of the slow way these ideas spread. A traveler visits one village, shares a story of how tea settled his cough. A merchant passes along another tale of how tea calmed his belly after a long journey. Piece by piece, the knowledge moved along roads and rivers, carried in quiet conversations, until more and more people knew that a simple leaf might bring relief. Close your eyes and picture the way these early teas were prepared. Not the refined porcelain cups of later ages, but rustic bowls carved from wood or shaped from rough clay. The leaves themselves were not carefully rolled or whisked into bright green froth. Instead, they might be boiled directly in water, pounded into cakes, or ground and mixed with grains. Some added ginger, onion, or orange peel, making a broth more like soup than the delicate tea we know now. Yet still, beneath the flavors, the familiar comfort lingered the soft bitterness. The earthy scent, the warmth that spread through the body. Imagine the atmosphere in a healer's room, the quiet crackle of firewood, the pot simmering gently, releasing thin ribbons of steam. The patient seated cross-legged, waiting with calm hope. The healer pours the tea into a bowl, the sound of liquid splashing softly against clay. The bowl is lifted carefully, held in both hands, sipped slowly. The patient breathes in the warmth, swallows, closes his eyes, and begins to feel at ease. The healer watches, says nothing, but knows that this small ritual of boiling and sharing has worked as much on the heart as on the body. In these times, tea was also tied to meditation and clarity. Scholars who worked late into the night, writing under the light of an oil lamp, found that tea kept them alert. Rather than falling into drowsiness, they could sip and continue their work, their minds sharper. Picture one such scholar, robes wrapped around him, hair bound high. On his desk lies a brush, inkstone, and several slips of bamboo. He sips tea slowly, eyes narrowing in focus, and the sound of his brush scratching fills the silence of the room. The tea steadies him, carrying him through hours of study. For monks too, tea became a quiet companion. Though this came later in greater strength, the seeds were here already. To sit in meditation required long hours of stillness, and sometimes drowsiness would creep in, heavy and slow. Tea, with its subtle bitterness, refreshed the spirit, lifted the haze of sleep, and let the monk remain in focus. Imagine the hush of a monastery, the sound of chanting carried faintly through the halls. And in one small room, a monk sitting quietly, sipping from a steaming bowl. The tea is not sweet or luxurious, but grounding, plain, and pure, a tether between body and mind. Think of how tea must have tasted then. Without refined processing, without careful artistry, it would have been rough, perhaps even harsh to our tongues. Yet people valued it not for flavor, but for what it gave them. Warmth in the belly, clarity in the head, comfort in the chest. Every sip was a reminder that the earth held gifts, and that even bitterness could carry sweetness in its aftertaste. The ritual of tea in these times was not about elegance or performance. It was simple, almost invisible. Yet within that simplicity lay the seed of what tea would become. Over time, as people drank for health, they began also to drink for pleasure. They learned to savor the warmth, to pause in their day, to share with a neighbor or guest. Tea's role shifted slowly, almost without notice, from remedy to companion. As we reflect on this, picture yourself in one of those early homes, seated near a fire as dusk settles outside. The healer pours you a small bowl of tea. It is hot in your hands, rough in flavor, but as you sip, you feel warmth spreading through your chest, easing the tiredness from your limbs. The sound of the fire is steady, the room dim except for its glow. Outside, crickets sing softly. In this moment, tea is not only medicine, it is comfort, it is presence, it is rest. And so, in these quiet beginnings, tea entered human life not through grand feasts or elaborate ceremonies, but through the gentle rhythm of healing. It was a leaf placed in water, a sip to soothe pain, a pause to steady the breath. From there it would grow, little by little, until it became not only a cure, but a culture. Not only a medicine, but a moment of shared peace. When tea first entered human life, it grew wild on the slopes of misty mountains, its leaves swaying softly in the breeze, hidden among other trees and shrubs. People wandered into the forest to pluck the leaves as they might gather mushrooms, berries, or herbs. It was a gift discovered rather than grown, a treasure found in the quiet folds of the land. But as centuries passed, people began to see that the tea plant offered something more than medicine. It was worth nurturing, worth tending, worth transforming into a steady companion. And so began the slow shift from wild gathering to cultivation. Imagine the setting: southern China, where mountains rise in gentle green waves, and rivers twist below like ribbons of silver. The air is thick with mist in the early mornings, dew glistening on every leaf.
Wow.
In these places, tea plants grew abundantly, their roots clinging to hillsides, their leaves tender with the moisture of fog. Farmers, seeing the value of these leaves, began to transplant them closer to their homes. They learned that the plant preferred shaded slopes, fertile soil, and the soft touch of rainfall. The act of cultivation was, in itself, a quiet rhythm of life. Farmers would wake at dawn, step barefoot onto damp earth, and tend to the young plants. They dug small furrows, cleared stones, and carried water in clay jars. Imagine the soft patter of water as it spilled from one vessel to the base of the plant, soaking the roots, darkening the earth. No machines hummed here, no harsh sounds of labor. Only the farmer's footsteps, the creak of wooden buckets, and the occasional call of birds overhead. At first, tea cultivation was simple. Plants were grown close to homes, harvested by hand, dried in the sun, and stored in woven baskets. The flavor was still rustic, but with care, farmers noticed differences. Leaves picked in the early spring were more delicate, sweeter on the tongue. Leaves gathered in late summer carried more bitterness, stronger and more grounding. Slowly, people began to recognize that the time of harvest mattered, that the way a leaf was treated after plucking shaped its character. This realization was the seed of tea artistry. Picture a family in these times. A child goes with her grandmother to the slopes, climbing barefoot among the plants. They reach out to pluck only the tender top leaves, soft and bright. Each leaf is dropped into a small basket, the sound like a faint whisper. Back at home, the leaves are spread on a bamboo tray, set out in the dappled sunlight. The air fills with their fragrance, grassy and fresh. In the evening, the leaves are placed over gentle heat, perhaps on a clay stove, to dry more fully. The grandmother turns them slowly with her hands, humming softly, the leaves crackling like firewood. This process, humble as it was, gave people something precious. Control. No longer did they depend only on the chance of finding tea in the wild. They could nurture it, shape it, plan for it, and in this shaping, tea began to settle deeper into human life, not as a rare herb, but as a companion one could rely on. As tea cultivation spread, villages began to share knowledge. One farmer discovered that shading plants with bamboo screens made the leaves softer. Another noticed that older plants produced deeper flavors than young shoots. These observations passed quietly from one person to another, whispered at markets, shared among neighbors. Bit by bit, tea became less of a mystery and more of a craft. Imagine the village markets of that time. Stalls of vegetables, fruits, woven cloths, and small bundles of tea wrapped in paper or cloth. Buyers would lift the packets, press them to their noses, inhale the faint scent. The tea seller might pour a small cup, brewed in a rough clay pot, for a taste. Conversations were soft, measured. A cup was shared, and hands lingered around its warmth. In these markets, tea began to take its first steps toward becoming not only medicine, but also trade. Cultivation also meant that tea plants themselves changed. Wild tea trees, tall and untamed, could grow for centuries. But cultivated tea plants were pruned and shaped, kept low so that their leaves could be reached easily. Imagine walking through a tea garden of this early period. The plants are short, their green tops forming neat rows along a slope. Mist curls among them in the morning, and the leaves glisten with droplets of dew. A soft breeze stirs, and the plants whisper together, a chorus of leaves. The people who cared for these plants did not yet think of tea as art. They thought of survival, of medicine, of steady comfort. Yet in their hands, tea was already becoming something more. The care they gave the plants, the gentle pruning, the mindful harvesting, the patient drying was itself a kind of ceremony, though they did not call it so. And perhaps it is in these quiet, practical beginnings that the heart of tea lies. In attention, in patience, in respect for small things. As centuries passed, these cultivated gardens grew larger. They spread from village to village, valley to valley. Some were tended by families for their own use. Others began to supply nobles and officials who valued tea not only for its medicinal properties, but also for its taste. A cup of tea became something to offer a guest, something to place on a scholar's desk, something to share with a friend. The plant that had once been gathered only in forests was now grown with intention, shaped by human hands, woven into the fabric of daily life. Picture the rhythm of a year in one of these tea gardens. It's in spring. Tender leaves unfurl, pale green, delicate, eager for the sun. Farmers pluck them carefully, their baskets filling slowly. In summer, the plants grow stronger, their leaves darker and more robust. Harvests are heavier, the air rich with the scent of drying leaves. In autumn, the garden's quiet, the plants preparing for rest. And in winter, the fields lie bare, touched by frost, waiting for the return of warmth. Each season carries its own beauty, its own sound, its own flavor in the cup. This cycle of cultivation was steady, grounding. For the farmer, tea was no longer just a leaf. It was livelihood, rhythm, connection to land. For the drinker, tea was no longer only medicine. It was comfort, flavor, a small daily ritual. Between the two, a bond was formed, as natural and enduring as the bond between soil and root, rain and leaf. And so, through cultivation, tea began its long journey from a wild plant to a cultural treasure. What started with a chance leaf falling into Shen Nong's pot became fields of green, tended by countless hands. What began as a bitter remedy became a drink to savor, to share, to pause with. The shift was slow, almost invisible, but it carried tea into every corner of life. As you sit here now, listening, imagine yourself walking in one of those early gardens. The air is cool and moist, the ground soft beneath your feet. The rows of tea plants stretch before you, their leaves trembling gently in the breeze. You reach out to pluck a tender shoot, and it is soft between your fingers. Place it in a basket. Hear the faint sound as it lands among the others. Around you, the world is quiet, except for the birds, the wind, and the soft hum of life. This is the birth of tea cultivation. This is the beginning of tea as we know it today. By the time of the Tang Dynasty, tea had moved far beyond its rustic beginnings as medicine and humble household comfort. The Tang era, spanning from the 7th to the 10th century, was a period of breathtaking cultural flowering in China. The capital city of Chang'an pulsed with life, markets overflowing with silks, spices, ceramics, and books. Streets bustling with merchants from distant lands, monasteries alive with chanting, poets scribbling verses by lantern light. And within this vibrant world, tea blossomed into an art form. Imagine the early morning streets of Chang'an. Stalls are just beginning to open, merchants arranging their wares, steam rising from food carts. Among them, a tea stall hums with quiet activity. Clay kettles sit above glowing embers, releasing thin trails of steam. The vendor ladles out bowls of hot tea, its aroma spreading in the cool air. Travelers stop to warm themselves, scholars pause to sip before continuing their studies, monks drink before entering the temples. Tea, once tucked away in the mountains, had entered the heart of the city. But in the Tang Dynasty, tea was not only common refreshment, it was elevated, celebrated, studied. The great turning point came with a single book, the Classic of Tea, written by Lu Yu in the 8th century. Lu Yu, often called the Sage of Tea, devoted his life to the drink, treating it with the reverence others gave to poetry, music, or calligraphy. His book was not a casual record. It was a work of devotion, a guide to preparing, appreciating, and respecting tea. Imagine Lu Yu himself seated in a quiet room, brush in hand, a small pot of tea steaming beside him. His robes are plain, his face calm. Outside, the hum of daily life carries on, but here there is only silence, punctuated by the occasional sip. He writes not hurriedly, but slowly, carefully, each character placed with thought. In his words, tea became more than leaves, and water it became a philosophy. Lu, you described the origins of tea, the best methods of cultivation, the ideal tools for preparation. He wrote of the importance of water, how spring water flowing gently from the mountains was the purest. He spoke of the harmony of elements: fire, water, leaves, and vessel coming together in balance. Reading his words is like stepping into a gentle current of thought, where every detail of making tea is an act of reverence, a small prayer. Through Lu Yu, tea gained a soul. It became a symbol of refinement, of balance, of clarity. No longer merely boiled with onions and herbs, it was prepared with attention, served with grace, enjoyed in stillness. Picture a scholar's gathering in the Tang era. The room is soft with lamplight, scrolls scattered on low tables. Friends sit cross-legged, reciting poetry, playing guqin, sharing stories. At the center, a pot of tea steams gently. The host pours into simple bowls, the sound of liquid flowing as soothing as the music. The tea is sipped slowly, appreciated not only for its taste, but for the way it completes the moment. The Tang court itself embraced tea. Emperors and nobles valued it as a symbol of culture and sophistication. To serve tea became a mark of hospitality, a gesture of refinement. Imagine an imperial banquet. Long tables lined with dishes, courtiers in elegant robes, musicians playing softly. Amid the grandeur, a pot of tea is presented with quiet ceremony. It is poured into cups of fine porcelain, their surfaces painted with delicate designs. Guests lift the cups with both hands, bow slightly, and sip. In that simple act, elegance is expressed more profoundly than through jewels or gold. Monasteries, too, deepened their relationship with tea in the Tang dynasty. Buddhist monks used it to aid meditation, its clarity keeping the mind awake through long hours of chanting and silence. Picture a monastery high in the mountains. Mist drifts over pine trees, bells ring faintly in the distance. In the meditation hall, rows of monks sit cross-legged, their eyes half closed, their breath steady. Before them, bowls of tea rest, steam curling upward. They sip slowly, grounding themselves in the warmth, then return to silence. The tea does not distract tit anchors. Tea also began to shape social rituals. Drinking tea together became a way to connect, to show respect, to build friendship. A host would prepare tea with care, offering it as a sign of welcome. A guest, receiving it with both hands, would express gratitude. These gestures were simple, but their simplicity carried deep meaning. Attention, presence, respect. Consider the tools of Tang tea culture. Bowls made of porcelain or stoneware, their glaze is smooth and cool to the touch. Kettles of bronze or iron placed carefully over charcoal embers. Bamboo whisks for mixing powdered tea, sieves for straining, trays for serving. Each object was crafted with care, not only for utility, but also for beauty. Holding one of these bowls, you would feel the weight balanced perfectly in your hands, the surface smooth, the color deep. Every detail was chosen to harmonize with the act of drinking, and think of the flavors. Tang tea was often compressed into cakes, ground into powder, then whisked into hot water until it frothed. The taste was robust, slightly bitter, yet refreshing, leaving a sweetness in the aftertaste. To sip, it was to experience contrasts, strength and delicacy, bitterness and sweetness, heat and coolness as it spread through the body. The Tang dynasty was also an age of poetry, and tea found its way into verse. Poets compared the rising steam to drifting clouds, the bitterness of tea to the hardships of life, the clarity it brought to the clarity of thought. One might sit beneath a blossoming plum tree, cup in hand, brush poised, writing lines that joined tea with the rhythms of nature. Poetry and tea together became companions of the soul. Close your eyes and imagine yourself as a guest in a Tang household. You are invited into a quiet courtyard, where bamboo sways gently and a small stream trickles nearby. Your host greets you with a bow and invites you to sit on a low cushion. Before you, a tray is set with a simple bowl, a kettle steaming softly. You watch as the host moves with grace, pouring, whisking, offering. The bowl is placed before you, warm to your touch. You lift it, inhale the fragrance, sip slowly. The taste is bold yet calming, the warmth spreading through you.
I will, round you.
The world slows. The conversation is soft, the air fragrant, the moment complete. This is tea in the Tang dynasty, art of presence, of harmony, of stillness. In this era, tea became more than a drink. It became a mirror of the Tang, spirit, refined, harmonious, deeply aware of beauty in the everyday. It carried the essence of balance. The meeting of fire and water, leaf and bowl, host and guest, silence and sound. Through tea, people learned to pause, to notice, to savor, and in doing so, they found not only comfort, but also clarity, not only refreshment, but also meaning. As the Tang dynasty flourished, tea was no longer a humble leaf plucked in secret. It was a cultural jewel woven into the life of scholars, monks, nobles, and common folk alike. It had taken root not only in the soil of China, but also in the hearts of its people. And this was only the beginning, for in the centuries to come, tea would continue its journey, spreading beyond China's borders, shaping worlds far away. But for now, in the glow of Tang's golden age, tea had found its voice, had become poetry in a cup, philosophy in a sip, a quiet companion to the soul. The Song dynasty, spanning the 10th to the 13th centuries, is remembered as one of China's most refined and artistic eras. Where the Thames had given tea its voice, the song gave it a stage. This was the age when tea drinking became a performance, an art that delighted the senses, a ritual that celebrated beauty as much as taste. In these centuries, tea became inseparable from poetry, painting, and philosophy. It was not merely consumed, it was experienced. Imagine the world of the Song dynasty. Cities such as Kaifeng and later Hangzhou thrived with markets, canals, bridges, and gardens. The streets echoed with merchants calling out their wares, the clatter of horses' hooves on stone, the faint strains of music drifting from tea houses. At the heart of this vibrant life, tea had become a daily presence, but also something elevated, a way to express refinement and cultivation. Unlike the Thames era, where powdered tea was whisked vigorously, the Song dynasty perfected this practice into a graceful performance. Tea was ground into a fine powder and placed into bowls of delicate porcelain. Hot water was poured in, and the tea whisked into a smooth froth, a surface as soft and cloud-like as morning mist. This was not a hurried act, but one of precision. The whisk moved in steady circles, coaxing bubbles into a creamy foam, the texture even and luminous. Watching it was as calming as the act of drinking itself. This practice gave rise to what was known as the tea contest. Friends, scholars, or even nobles would gather together, each preparing tea, competing to see whose whisking created the finest froth, whose surface held its bubbles longest, whose bowl gleamed like jade beneath the foam. Yet these contests were not fierce competitions, but gentle expressions of artistry, as though painting with water and leaf. The pleasure was in the act itself, in the watching, the tasting, the sharing. Picture such a gathering, come a quiet courtyard shaded by pine and plum. Lanterns hang from the eaves, their glow soft and golden. A table is set low, porcelain bowls arranged with care. Guests lean forward as the host begins. The sound of whisking fills the air, soft and rhythmic, like the beating of wings. The surface of the tea turns pale and frothy, smooth as silk. A bowl is placed before you. You lift it gently. The porcelain cooled against your fingers. The froth light is cloud on your lips. The taste is subtle, delicate, almost ethereal. It lingers not with heaviness, but with clarity, leaving behind a clean sweetness. Porcelain itself became central to Song tea culture. The dynasty's artisans perfected ceramics, creating bowls that were not only vessels but works of art. Some were glazed in deep black, so that the pale foam of whisked tea shimmered like moonlight against night sky. Others bore shades of blue or celadon green, their colors soft and understated, harmonizing with the tea within. To hold such a bowl was to hold centuries of craft in your hands, to feel beauty not only in sight but in touch. Tea in the Song dynasty was also deeply tied to philosophy. The thinkers of the age, influenced by Confucian ideals and Taoist reflection, found in tea a mirror of their values. Tea was clarity, modesty, simplicity. It reminded one of balance, the harmony of elements, the subtlety of quiet pleasures, the importance of refinement in small things. To drink tea was to cultivate the self, not through grandeur, but through attentiveness. Buddhist monasteries continued to hold tea as a companion to meditation. Monks drank whisked tea to stay awake during long nights of chanting, but also to embody mindfulness. Imagine a monastery perched high on a mountain. Mists roll in through pine forests. Bells echo faintly. In the meditation hall, rows of monks sit still, bowls before them. They sip tea slowly, each swallow taken with full awareness, grounding themselves in the present moment. The tea becomes part of their practice, as vital as breath. Poetry of the Song dynasty sang of tea with exquisite sensitivity. Poets compared the froth to drifting clouds, the fragrance to the first blossoms of spring, the lingering sweetness to the memory of a dear friend. A scholar might sit by candlelight, brush in hand, a bowl of tea steaming beside him, writing verses that linked the art of drinking with the art of living. Tea and poetry, side by side, became twin expressions of a cultivated soul. We can also imagine the imperial court, where tea was prepared with the highest refinement. In the palace, surrounded by gardens and carved halls, attendants whisked bowls for the emperor and his guests. Each gesture was graceful, each detail perfected. the temperature of water, texture of powder, the quality of porcelain. Serving tea at court was not only hospitality but ceremony, a reflection of the dynasty's elegance. Beyond the court, tea houses flourished in song cities. These were lively places where travelers, merchants, scholars, and common folk gathered. Inside, the air was warm with steam, the chatter of voices blending with the clink of bowls. Tea was served to accompany conversation, music, even storytelling. For some, these tea houses were places of comfort, an escape from the bustle of daily life. For others, they were places of meeting, where friendships formed and news spread. Imagine entering one, the air fragrant, the light soft, the warmth welcoming. A bowl of frothy tea is set before you, and in that small space, the world feels gentler. The Song dynasty also saw tea spreading outward, reaching lands beyond China. Trade carried powdered tea, along with porcelain bowls and whisks, to neighboring countries. In Japan, monks returning from China brought with them the practice of whisked tea, planting the seeds of what would later blossom into the Japanese tea ceremony. Across seas and along roads, tea began its journey as a traveler, carrying with it the quiet grace of the song. In all these ways, tea during this era was not just a drink, but an expression of beauty, a companion of art, a ritual of harmony. To sip a bowl of whisked tea was to pause, to notice, to find elegance in simplicity. It was an act that brought together host and guest, scholar and poet, monk and emperor, into a shared moment of presence. Close your eyes and picture yourself in the Song dynasty now. You are seated in a quiet garden where bamboo sways gently in the evening breeze. Before you, a porcelain bowl rests on a lacquered tray. The host pours hot water, lifts the whisk, and begins to stir. The sound is steady, soothing like the rustle of wind through leaves. Slowly, a foam gathers, smooth and luminous, filling the bowl like dawn light filling the sky. The bowl is placed in your hands, its surface cool and smooth. You raise it to your lips. Inhale the faint fragrance, sip slowly. The froth touches your tongue, light as air. The taste subtle and refreshing. For a moment, nothing else exists but the bowl in your hands, the warmth in your body, the stillness around you. This is tea in the Song dynasty. Delicate, refined, graceful. It is not a drink to quench thirst, but a ritual to nourish the spirit. It invites you to slow, to savor, to find beauty in the simplest act. And in doing so, it reflects the heart of the song world, a world where art and life were woven together, where even a cup of tea became a performance of harmony. The Yuan dynasty, born from the vast Mongol Empire, stretched across lands and cultures, bringing together people from China, Central Asia, Persia, and beyond. With this mingling came new influences, new tastes, and new rhythms of daily life. Tea, by this time, already a beloved companion in China, found itself woven into a tapestry of change. If the Song dynasty was about refinement and artistry, the Yuan was about blending. It's about resilience. It's about continuity through transformation. Let's imagine the world under the Yuan. Cities swelled with merchants from distant lands. Caravans carried spices, silks, precious stones, and quietly tucked among them tea leaves. The Silk Road buzzed with voices in many languages, the clatter of wheels on stone, the scent of saffron, musk, and incense mixing in the air. In this dynamic world, tea remained a comfort, a gentle thread of continuity that soothed both traveler and local alike. The Mongols themselves had long traditions of their own beverages, particularly dairy-based drinks, such as fermented mare's milk, known as arag. Their diets were rich with milk and meat, suited to life on open steppes. When they came into contact with Chinese tea culture, what emerged was a blending tea was often prepared with milk, salt, and sometimes butter, creating a heartier, nourishing drink. This was different from the refined froths of the Song dynasty, but it carried its own warmth. Picture a Mongol tent pitched on the wide grasslands, the horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. Inside, felt rugs cover the ground, and the air smells faintly of smoke from a central hearth. A pot simmers over the fire, filled with water, milk, and tea leaves. Salt is stirred in, sometimes butter too, enriching the liquid. The drink that emerges is thick, savory, warming. It is not delicate like whisked tea, but sustaining, fortifying against the chill of the open steppe. To sip it is to feel full, comforted, steadied. In China proper, however, traditional ways of preparing tea did not disappear. Powdered tea and whisking, the pride of the song, still continued, especially among scholars and in monasteries. But loose-leaf tea, simply steeped in hot water, began to grow in popularity as well. This method, simpler and more direct, suited the changing times. Instead of grinding leaves into powder and whisking them into froth, one could place whole leaves into a pot or cup, pour hot water over them, and watch as they unfurled, releasing their fragrance slowly. This shift seems small, yet it marked the beginning of what would become the dominant way of preparing tea for centuries to come. Imagine a small clay pot, plain and sturdy, filled with fresh water brought just to a boil. A handful of curled leaves are dropped inside, expand and dance, turning the water golden green. The fragrance rises, clear and clean. Pouring it into a cup, one finds the taste direct and honest. No froth, no performance, just leaf and water, earth and fire. The Yuan dynasty, with its openness to many cultures, also became a period when tea spread more widely beyond China. Through the Mongols' vast connections, tea reached lands it had not before. Envoys carried it westward. Travelers encountered it in bustling markets. It became part of diplomatic exchanges, a gift between rulers, a token of hospitality between strangers. Tea was no longer only a Chinese treasure, it was becoming part of a larger world. In the cities of Yuan, China, tea houses continued to flourish, though they carried a different character than those of the song. They were lively places, filled with the energy of merchants and travelers from many lands. Imagine stepping inside one. The room is bustling, the air fragrant with tea and food. On one side, scholars sit quietly, sipping from bowls, discussing literature or painting. On another, merchants haggle over silks and spices, pausing now and then to drink. The murmur of voices mixes with the clatter of cups, the scrape of benches, the occasional burst of laughter. In the midst of all this, tea serves as common ground, something shared across differences of language or culture. Even in the imperial court, tea remained significant, though the atmosphere was less about delicate froth competitions and more about lavish displays of abundance. Banquets included tea alongside wine and milk-based drinks, a symbol of both tradition and adaptability. The emperors of the Yuan valued tea not only for taste, but also as a symbol of connection to China's heritage, a way of honoring the culture they had inherited. Tea also continued to inspire art and thought during the Yuan. Scholars and poets, even in times of political change, turned to tea as a companion in their solitude. The Yuan was an era when many scholars, disheartened by the new rule, withdrew from court life and sought solace in nature. They retreated to mountains or gardens, bringing with them little more than brush, ink, and tea.
Imagine such a retreat.
A scholar seated by a mountain stream, inkstone before him, a small brazier nearby heating water. He pours tea into a simple cup, sips, and lets his thoughts drift into poetry. In that moment, tea is both anchor and muse, steady in the heart amid change. This period also saw the growing use of teapots, particularly small clay ones, to become essential in later centuries. Unlike bowls used for whisked tea, these teapots allowed leaves to steep more naturally, water poured and repowered with care. Holding a small teapot in one's hands, feeling its warmth seep through the clay, watching steam curl upward, these were quiet pleasures, intimate and grounding. The Yuan dynasty reminds us that tea is not fixed, but adaptable. It can be refined or rustic, ceremonial or simple, delicate or hearty. In one place, monks continued to whisk bowls of frothy powder, seeking clarity and meditation. In another, nomads sipped milk tea and felt tense, drawing warmth against the wind. In yet another, merchants in crowded cities shared cups over deals, and scholars in solitude poured leaves into clay pots. In all these forms, tea carried the same essence: comfort, pause, presence. Close your eyes and imagine now that you are traveling along the Silk Road during the Yuan dynasty. You ride with a caravan across dusty plains. The sun sets, painting the sky with streaks of crimson and gold. At night, you gather with others around a fire. Someone produces Paris Chinese leaves, perhaps prepared with milk, perhaps steeped simply in water. The cups are passed around. You lift yours. Feel the warmth against your fingers. Sip slowly. The taste is both familiar and new, carrying with it the mingling of cultures, the resilience of tradition. A quiet reminder that wherever you are, tea can be home. The Yuan dynasty, though turbulent in politics, showed how tea could endure and transform. From frothy bowls to steeped leaves, from porcelain to clay, from Chinese halls to Mongol tents, tea wove itself into every fabric of life. It remained what it always had been since Shennan's first sip, a moment of comfort. A pause in time, a gentle reminder of presence. The Ming dynasty was a turning point, a time when tea culture shifted in ways that shaped its future for centuries. After the Yuan's blending of traditions, the Ming restored Han Chinese rule and brought a renewed sense of identity, of refinement, and of artistry. Tea, too, transformed. Powdered tea, so beloved in the song, gradually faded, giving way to loose-leaf brewing. Out of this change emerged the teapot, porcelain cups, and the style of tea drinking most familiar to us today. Imagine stepping into the early Ming world. Cities glowed with lanterns, their streets alive with merchants and artisans. Imperial palaces gleamed with red and gold, their courtyards filled with the scent of pine and incense. In private homes, families gathered around small tables, and on those tables lay tea, not in pressed cakes to be whisked, but in loose leaves stored in jars. The leaves were prized for their shape, their fragrance, their color. To steep them was to invite the leaf to open, to reveal its essence slowly and gently. This change began with the emperor himself. Zhu Yuanzhang, the Hongwu emperor, founder of the Ming dynasty, issued an edict. Tribute teas, once made in the form of compressed cakes for whisking, should instead be presented as loose leaves. It was a practical decision. Powdering tea required immense labor, and tribute teas in the Song era had grown more elaborate, demanding endless effort from peasants and artisans. The emperor's order simplified the process and, in doing so, changed tea forever. Loose-leaf brewing had existed earlier, but now it became the standard. Imagine the difference in experience. Instead of grinding leaves into fine powder and whisking them into froth, one now placed whole leaves into a pot, poured hot water, and waited. The leaves unfurled gracefully, turning the water golden or emerald. The drinker watched, waited, and then poured the liquid into small cups. It was less about performance, more about patience. Less about artistry of froth, more about the quiet beauty of the leaf itself. With this came the rise of teapots. Small, elegant vessels made from clay or porcelain became the heart of tea preparation. Among them, the humble Yixing clay teapot became most famous. From the rich red clay of Yixing in Jiangsu province, artisans crafted small teapots that absorbed the flavor of the tea with every brew. Imagine holding one in your hands, warm and sturdy, its surface darkened by years of use. To pour from it was to take part in a ritual, not of extravagance, but of intimacy. Porcelain, too, flourished in the Ming. Jingdezhen, the great porcelain capital, produced cups so thin and luminous they were said to glow when held up to light. Their surfaces were painted with blue and white designs, rivers, cranes, flowers that mirrored the world outside. Imagine lifting such a cup, its edge fine against your lips, the steam of tea rising in delicate tendrils. To drink was to hold both nature and art in your hands. The Ming era also brought new varieties of tea. While earlier dynasties favored green teas, the Ming encouraged experimentation with roasting and fermenting. Oolong and black teas began to appear, their deeper flavors appealing to those who sought warmth and richness. Imagine sipping a cup of roasted oolong, its fragrance floral yet earthy, its taste lingering on the tongue like the memory of autumn leaves. Each new method of processing opened a new world of sensation, a new way for tea to comfort. In households across China, tea became more accessible. No longer only the domain of emperors and scholars, it was enjoyed by families in villages and towns. A farmer returning from the fields might sit with his wife and children, a simple clay pot between them. The water boils, the leaves are dropped in, the cups are filled, the family drinks together in silence, sharing warmth after a long day. It was part of daily life, woven into the rhythm of home. Yet in the courts and among scholars, tea retained its aura of elegance. Ming literati, who valued simplicity and nature, found in loose-leaf brewing a harmony with their philosophy. They wrote poems about the shape of leaves, the clarity of water, the sound of pouring, the fragrance that lingered after the last sip. To them, tea was not merely drink, but meditation. Imagine a scholar in his garden pavilion, bamboo swaying outside, water simmering in a small kettle. He pours tea into porcelain cups, breathes in the fragrance, and writes a verse about the fleeting beauty of steam rising in cool air. Tea gatherings in the Ming often emphasized this simplicity. Instead of competitions of whisked froth, friends gathered quietly, each bringing their best leaves, their finest cups. They brewed, they tasted, they spoke softly of art and philosophy. There was no rush, no spectacle, or the shared appreciation of tea in the moment it created. Even within monasteries, tea continued to hold its place. Monks prepared it simply, steeping leaves during long sessions of meditation. The bitterness kept drowsiness at bay. The warmth steadied the body in stillness. Imagine sitting in a temple hall, incense smoke curling through the rafters, monks chanting softly. Between verses, a small cup of tea is passed into your hands. You sip, the bitterness grounding you, the warmth carrying you deeper into presence. Beyond China, the Ming era was when tea began to journey farther than ever before. Ships carried porcelain, silk, and tea to Southeast Asia, to Japan, and eventually to Europe. At first it was a curiosity, a foreign leaf with mysterious properties. But in time, it would become a global companion. Imagine a Chinese ship rocking gently on the waves, its hold filled with jars of tea. The sailors drink from simple cups as stars wheel above them, the tea a small comfort amid the vast sea. The Ming dynasty reminds us of the elegance and simplicity.
By letting tea be itself, water, heat, reveal the quiet richness hidden in plainness.
To steep tea was to practice patience, to observe transformation, to find beauty not in excess, but in restraint. Close your eyes now and place yourself in a Ming scholar's garden. The air is cool, cicadas hum in the distance. A kettle begins to sing, its steam rising like mist over mountains. You lift the lid of a small teapot, watching leaves unfurl, twisting and stretching as though waking from sleep. You pour the golden liquid into a porcelain cup, its surface painted with cranes in flight. You sip. The taste is gentle yet deep, carrying the quiet of bamboo groves, the freshness of mountain air. Around you, the world is hushed. In this moment, there is only tea, only presence, only stillness. The Ming dynasty gave tea its modern form, its vessel, its rhythm. From here it would travel farther, evolve further, but at its heart remained the same essence discovered so long ago: a leaf, a sip, a moment of calm. The Qing dynasty unfolded like a long, flowing scroll, stretching from the 17th century into the dawn of the 20th. It was a dynasty of contrasts, emperors in gilded halls and farmers in the fields, of vast conquests and quiet domestic rhythms. And in all of this, tea was ever present, weaving itself into the lives of emperors, merchants, monks, and villagers alike. If the Ming gave us loose-leaf tea in porcelain cups, the Qing carried tea out into the world, making it not only China's treasure, but the world's companion. Imagine the Forbidden City at dawn, its tiled roofs glistening under the pale light. The palace corridors stretch endlessly, and within them, tea moves as silently as a shadow. Servants prepare pots of the finest leaves for the emperor and his court, carrying them in covered cups called giwan. These cups, crafted from porcelain, with saucer, bowl, and lid, became a symbol of Qing refinement. To drink from a gaiwan was to engage with tea in its purest form, watching the leaves swirl, inhaling their fragrance, sipping slowly without rush. The Qing emperors themselves were deeply involved with tea. Kangxi Yongzheng and Qianlong III, great rulers each, left behind writings and records that show their devotion to it. The Qianlong emperor, in particular, loved tea with a passion. He wrote poems about it, collected teapots, and encouraged the development of different tea styles. Imagine him in his study, dressed in silk robes, holding a delicate porcelain cup. He tilts it slightly, watching the light shimmer on the surface of the golden liquid, then takes a careful sip. For him, tea was not only refreshment but art, a mirror of culture itself. But the Qing dynasty was also a time when tea moved beyond the palace, into the hands of common folk in forms both new and familiar. In bustling cities like Beijing and Guangzhou, tea houses flourished. Imagine walking into one on a busy afternoon. Wooden tables are crowded with merchants, storytellers, travelers, and scholars. The air hums with conversation, laughter, and the clatter of cups. A server rushes between tables, carrying pots of steaming tea. Outside, carts creak along stone streets, but inside the tea house, the world slows, softened by warmth and companionship. These tea houses were more than places to drink, they were centers of community. People came to share news, listen to opera, debate, poetry, or simply rest their feet after long hours. In one corner, an old storyteller spins tales of ancient heroes, his voice carrying over the sound of boiling kettles. In another, two friends lean close, their heads bent together, cups of tea between them, speaking of family, of fortunes, of dreams. The tea house was democratic, a space where the rich and poor might sit side by side, united by the simple act of sharing a pot of tea. In rural villages, tea was humbler, but no less cherished. Families brewed it in clay pots, offering it to guests as the first gesture of welcome. Picture a farmer's home. Walls of earth and wood, smoke curling from the hearth, children running in and out. A guest arrives, dusty from the road. Before any questions are asked, before any food is prepared, a pot of tea is placed before him. He lifts the bowl with both hands, sips, and feels his weariness ease.
Ow.
In that moment, the guest is no longer a stranger, but a friend. The Qing also gave rise to new tea styles, expanding beyond green and roasted teas. Black tea, known in China as Hongsha, became especially important. It was during this era that varieties like Lapsang Souchong were first crafted, with their smoky, robust flavor. Oolong too reached new heights of refinement in regions like Fujian and Guangdong, offering a balance between green freshness and roasted depth. Imagine the fragrance of oolong, floral and honeyed, lingering in the air as steam rises from a small clay pot. Each sip is like tasting the mountain slopes where the leaves grew, mist clinging to their edges. And then came Pur, the aged tea of Yunnan. Stored in compressed cakes, Pur could be kept for years, even decades, its flavor deepening with time. Merchants carried it along caravan routes, trading it for horses in Tibet, or sending it farther into Central Asia. Imagine a caravan crossing a high plateau, snow swirling in the wind. The traders stop for rest, build a fire, and brew pur from a cake they carry. The tea is dark, earthy, warming. In that bitter cold, it is a lifeline, a reminder of hearth and home. As tea diversified, so too did the vessels. Qing artisans perfected porcelain, creating cups painted with fine detail lotuses, mountains, dragons, waves. But alongside porcelain, Yixing teapots remained beloved, their clay surfaces absorbing the memory of countless brews. Imagine lifting such a teapot, its surface smooth and rich from years of handling. Pour, and the liquid flows like a ribbon, steady and graceful. The teapot itself is not only a vessel, but a companion, holding within it the history of every gathering, every sip. The Qing dynasty also marked the beginning of tea's global story. From ports in Fujian and Guangdong, ships carried tea across seas to Southeast Asia, to India, to Europe. In Britain, tea became a daily ritual, reshaping social customs. In Russia, caravans brought tea along the long road to Moscow, where it was brewed in samovars and sweetened with sugar. In Japan, though, the tea ceremony remained rooted in powdered matcha. Chinese loose-leaf teas were imported and enjoyed. The world began to drink together, connected through this single leaf. But as tea spread, so too did its challenges. The great demand from abroad changed the balance of trade, eventually sparking conflicts like the Opium Wars. Yet within China itself, tea remained a thread of continuity, binding daily life even as dynasties rose and fell. It was the drink of emperors and farmers, monks and merchants, rich and poor. Imagine now a quiet evening in a Qing household. The family sits together after the day's work. A small brazier glows with coals. A kettle hums with gentle steam. The mother places leaves into a clay pot, pours the hot water, waits. The children whisper to each other, their voices hushed in the firelight. The father leans back, weary but at peace. The pot is poured, cups passed from hand to hand. They drink together, the warmth of the tea carrying them into calm. Outside, the world is vast, filled with struggles and change. But inside, in this circle of light, there is only tea, only family, only rest. The Qing dynasty was a time of expansion, of connection, of transformation. Tea traveled farther than ever before, yet remained rooted in the simple gestures of daily life. A cup offered, a sip shared, a moment of presence. It was both global and intimate, both powerful and humble. In this way, tea mirrored life itself. Close your eyes and picture yourself in a Qing tea house. The room is warm, filled with chatter and laughter. A storyteller's voice rises above the hum, his words weaving through the air. A server sets a pot on your table, steam curling like a dragon. You lift your cup, porcelain cool against your fingers, the tea within glowing amber. You sip, and in that moment, the centuries dissolve. You are here now, sharing in the same comfort that has carried countless souls before you. The Qing dynasty carried tea into the modern world, a gift that would endure long after the dynasty itself had ended. Through porcelain and clay, through black, green, oolong, and pour, it became more than a Chinese treasure, it became the world's companion. A gentle reminder that in every sip there is warmth, connection, and peace. The journey of tea into Europe was long, winding, and almost accidental. For centuries it remained unknown beyond Asia, nurtured in Chinese hillsides, sipped in Japanese temples, traded in Mongol caravans. But by the early 17th century, with the rise of maritime exploration and global trade, this quiet leaf crossed oceans and entered new worlds. What followed was a transformation not just in how tea was consumed, but in how societies gathered, how they paused, how they built rituals around daily life. Picture a European port city in the early 1600s. Ships from the East India Companies glide into harbor, their sails creaking, their holds heavy with porcelain, silk, spices, and tucked among them tea. At first, it is exotic, almost mysterious. A jar of dried leaves unfamiliar to most, known only to traders and scholars. They describe it as a medicinal herb from China, a drink with remarkable powers. In apothecaries, it is sold alongside cinnamon, pepper, and ginger. Its price is high, its audience limited, yet curiosity stirs. In Holland, the Dutch East India Company was among the first to bring tea regularly from Asia. Amsterdam's merchants, always eager for novelty, introduced it to wealthy families. Imagine a merchant's home, its rooms decorated with Chinese porcelain and lacquered chests. Guests are served a small cup of steaming tea. They sip cautiously, the taste strange yet alluring. Conversation circles around its qualities. Does it lift the spirit? Already tea is not only a drink, but a subject of wonder. From Holland, tea spread to France. The French court, always alive with fashions and refinements, embraced it as a sign of sophistication. Courtiers sipped tea alongside coffee and chocolate, each competing to be the drink of elegance. Imagine the salons of Paris, chandeliers glimmering, voices rising and falling in soft debate, and porcelain cups of tea passed among the guests. It was not yet a daily habit, but a curiosity, a mark of worldliness. And then came England. When tea reached London in the mid-1600s, it began as medicine, recommended in pamphlets for its supposed ability to cure everything from headaches to melancholy. But soon it leapt from apothecaries to coffee houses, and from coffee houses into homes. Imagine a London coffee house of 1660. The air is thick with pipe smoke. The chatter of voices fills the room, and at one table, a man orders tea. The server brings a small pot and cup. Round him, curious eyes watch. He sips, and the others soon follow. Within years, tea is no longer rare. It is a fashion sweeping across the city. Catherine of Braganza, a Portuguese princess who married King Charles II of England, played no small role. She loved tea, having grown up with it in Portugal where Dutch traders had already introduced it. When she arrived in England, she brought her taste with her, and soon the court followed. Imagine her chambers at Whitehall Palace. Porcelain cups from China, silver spoons glinting in candlelight, trays of tea served two ladies in waiting. The queen sips, the court imitates, and tea becomes the drink of England's elite. By the 18th century, tea had settled into English life. It was no longer exotic, it was essential. In homes, in inns, in parlors, the teapot became the center of hospitality. The rituals deepened, sugar was added, then milk. Families gathered around tables, cups clinking softly, conversation flowing. Tea had become not only a beverage, but a social anchor, a moment of pause in daily life. Think of a household in London around 1750. The fire crackles, the table is laid. A teapot of blue and white porcelain rests on a tray, steam curling from its spout. Cups are set out, silver tongs lift sugar cubes into each. The tea is poured, rich and fragrant. Children whisper, parents talk softly of the day's events. In that warm room, tea is more than drink. It is comfort, togetherness, the fabric of family. Yet tea was not only comfort, it was commerce. Its demand fueled entire industries. Ships sailed from China laden with leaves, returning to European ports where merchants eagerly awaited. The trade was vast, fortunes were made, and competition was fierce. Dutch, Portuguese, English all vied for the right to carry this leaf across oceans. Tea was no longer just a cultural treasure, it was a global commodity. With tea came porcelain. Europeans had no tradition of fine porcelain making, and Chinese cups and teapots became prized possessions. They were collected, displayed, cherished. In many homes, porcelain was more than a vessel. It was art, a sign of refinement. Imagine a cabinet in an English parlor, its shelves lined with cups painted with blue dragons, bowls with lotus blossoms, teapots shaped like gourds. Each piece spoke of faraway lands, of oceans crossed, of elegance brought into the home. By the late 1700s, tea drinking had become so woven into English life that it shaped identity itself. Afternoon tea emerged, not yet in the formal sense it would later take, but as a daily pause, a moment to refresh. Workers drank tea for energy, ladies drank it for refinement, children drank it with milk for warmth. The nation had adopted it, made it its own. And yet, even as Europe embraced tea, its journey was shadowed by struggle. The vast trade created imbalances, debts, and conflicts. The British East India Company imported tea in such volumes that it altered economies. To balance the trade, they turned to opium, leading to wars that scarred history. But within homes and parlors and gardens, these shadows were distant. For the drinker, tea was still warmth in the cup, still companionship in the evening, still comfort by the fire. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself in Europe during this time. Perhaps in a Dutch merchant's home, sipping tea by a canal. Perhaps in a Paris salon, with tea poured as poetry is read aloud. Perhaps in an English parlor, porcelain teapots steaming, silver spoons glinting, firelight dancing on the walls. You lift your cup, inhale the fragrance, sip slowly. The world is changing, empires rising, oceans crossed, trades made but here in this moment. Tea is only tea, gentle, grounding, timeless. Tea's arrival in Europe was not only the story of a leaf carried across seas, it was the story of how cultures meet, how rituals shift, how something foreign becomes familiar. In Europe, tea became not only a drink, but a way of life, shaping habits, industries, even identities. And from Europe, tea's journey would continue, carried into colonies, into the Americas, into every corner of the world. The leaf that once fell into Shennon's pot had crossed mountains, deserts, seas, and centuries. Now, in Europe, it had become a part of daily life. The story of tea was no longer only China's, no longer Asia's, it was the world's. When tea arrived in the American colonies, it carried with it all the weight of Europe's fascination, refinement, and ritual. But in this new land, tea was destined to take on a different meaning. Here, across the Atlantic, tea would become not just a drink of comfort, but a symbol first of community and later of resistance, even rebellion. Picture a colonial home in Boston or Philadelphia in the early 1700s. The hearth glows with fire, and on the wooden table rests a teapot imported from China, perhaps decorated with blue and white scenes of rivers and pagodas. Families gather at the table, pouring tea into cups, sweetening it with sugar, sometimes softening it with milk. These moments are quiet, domestic. The taste of tea, carried across oceans, now grounds itself in the rhythm of daily colonial life. Tea drinking in America was more than habit, it was identity. To sip tea was to show connection to the old world, to refinement, to civility. In parlors, tea tables became the center of hospitality. Guests were offered tea in porcelain cups, sometimes with silver spoons, and conversation flowed as steam curled into the air. Imagine the sound. Cups clinking softly, chairs creaking on wooden floors, the murmur of voices blending with the hiss of the hearth. In these rooms, tea was both comfort and culture. By the mid-1700s, tea had spread throughout the colonies. Merchants imported it in vast quantities, and advertisements for the latest shipments appeared in newspapers. Even in modest homes, tea became a staple, drunk at breakfast, at gatherings, at the end of long days. For colonists, tea was not only fashionable, it was part of daily life, as essential as bread. Yet, beneath this comfort, tensions stirred. The colonies depended on imported tea, and with it came the weight of British control. The British East India Company, which dominated the trade, held a powerful grip on supply and prices. Taxes on tea became a source of growing resentment. Colonists who once lifted cups in peaceful comfort now began to see each sip as entangled with politics. The Tea Act of 1773, meant to aid the struggling East India Company by giving it a monopoly, became the breaking point. Colonists, already weary of taxation without representation, saw the act not as relief, but as control. Tea, once a symbol of refinement, now became a symbol of oppression. Imagine the tension in Boston in December of that year. Ships sit in the harbor, their holds filled with tea chests. Citizens gather in taverns and meeting halls, voices rising in anger. By nightfall, men disguised as Mohawk warriors slip through the streets. They climb aboard the ships, open the chests, and spill tea into the dark waters. The harbor steams faintly as leaves soak into salt water. This act, remembered as the Boston Tea Party, is more than protested as a declaration. Tea, once a comfort, has become a spark for revolution. But beyond this famous night, the story of tea in America remained also one of daily life. Even as boycotts spread, families still gathered around their tables. Some turned to herbal alternatives: chamomile, raspberry leaf, or Liberty tea made from local plants. Yet the ritual of sitting together, of pouring, of sipping, endured. Tea's essence remained: warmth, conversation, community. Imagine a colonial family during these boycotts. The teapot is empty of imported leaves, but the mother brews a pot of dried herbs gathered from the garden. The liquid is not the same, less fragrant, less refined, but still warm. The family gathers as always, holding their cups, sharing stories, resting together after the day's work. Even in defiance, the ritual of tea remained intact. For women especially, tea gatherings were central to social life. In parlors across the colonies, women met to share news, to discuss families, to organize boycotts, to foster bonds. The tea table became not just a place of comfort, but a space of quiet power. To drink or not to drink imported tea was a choice heavy with meaning, and women, as guardians of the household, stood at the center of that choice. And yet, for all the political turmoil, tea never lost its softer side. Even revolution could not undo the comfort it gave. Soldiers during the war longed for it, families missed it, merchants smuggled it. And when peace came, tea remained, rejoining homes as both necessity and pleasure. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself in colonial America. Perhaps you are in a Boston tavern, where talk of resistance fills the air and cups of tea are quietly boycotted. Perhaps you are in a Virginia parlor, where a hostess sets out a tray with delicate cups, serving a blend of local herbs to show loyalty to the cause. Or perhaps you are simply in a farmhouse, where after a day in the fields, a family gathers, a pot simmering, cups warming cold hands. In all these places, tea is more than a drink. It is a symbol, a gesture, a thread of connection. In America, tea became not only part of domestic life, but also part of history. It was at once comfort and protest, routine and rebellion. Each cup carried both warmth and weight. And in this way, tea's story in America was never simple. It was a story of ordinary families, of extraordinary acts, of a leaf that crossed seas to shape the birth of a nation. The Victorian era, spanning much of the 19th century under Queen Victoria's reign, was a time when tea reached its height of elegance in Britain and beyond. No longer simply an imported leaf or a household drink, tea became ritual, spectacle, and identity. It shaped architecture, industry, social life, and even gender roles. This was the age when afternoon tea was born, when tea houses flourished, and when the very idea of tea became inseparable from notions of refinement and civility. Imagine London in the 1840s. The city is swelling with industry, its streets filled with carriages, its skies gray with smoke. Factories hum, railways expand, fortunes rise and fall. Amid this energy, tea provides pause. In parlors across the city, tables are set with porcelain cups, silver teapots, sugar bowls, and plates of biscuits. At 4 o'clock, households stop. Servants wheel in trays, friends gather, conversations soften, cups are lifted. This daily ritual known as afternoon tea becomes one of the defining features of Victorian life. The credit for this ritual is often given to Anna, the Duchess of Bedford, who in the 1840s began requesting tea and light food in the late afternoon to stave off hunger between lunch and dinner. Soon, her gatherings became fashionable. Other ladies of society imitated her, and before long, afternoon tea was woven into the very fabric of social life. Imagine the Duchess's parlor, tall windows spilling light across velvet drapes. A table set with delicate china, plates of finger sandwiches, scones with clotted cream, small cakes. Guests sit in conversation, sipping tea, nibbling pastries, their laughter mingling with the clink of cups. What began as a practical remedy became a cultural institution. Victorian tea tables carried more than refreshments, they carried symbolism. To host a proper tea was to demonstrate refinement, order, and grace. Every detail mattered: the shine of the silver, the smoothness of the linen, the beauty of the cups. The ceremony was not stiff but elegant, a dance of gestures. The pouring of tea, the passing of sugar, the stirring of spoonsall were small rituals of civility. Even in modest homes, where luxury was scarce, families strove to imitate these rituals, setting aside time to share tea together. In public, tea houses and tea gardens became central to Victorian leisure. In London and other cities, tea rooms offered safe, respectable spaces where women could gather outside their homes, a rarity in earlier centuries. Imagine stepping into a Victorian tea room. Polished wood counters, mirrors reflecting warm lamplight, waitresses in crisp uniforms, carrying pots and trays. Families sat together, ladies chatted, businessmen met quietly. The air smelled of tea and baked goods, a sweetness that softened the noise of the city outside. The Victorian period also saw tea tied directly to industry and empire. The British East India Company had once dominated the trade. But by the mid-19th century, the empire itself was producing tea. Plantations in India and Ceylon, Sri Lanka became the backbone of supply, feeding Britain's growing demand. Tea was no longer only Chinese. It became imperial, bound to the labor of thousands in distant lands. Ships steamed across oceans, railways carried crates inland, docks groaned under the weight of cargo. And yet, for the Victorian family at the table, the global journey disappeared into the simple comfort of a poured cup. The taste of Victorian tea was changing as well. Black tea, strong and robust, grew in popularity, suiting milk and sugar, which were by now staples of the ritual. Imagine a cup of Assam or Darjeeling, its amber liquid rich and bold, softened by milk, sweetened by sugar cubes dropped with silver tongs. The sound of the cube hitting the cup, the swirl of cream in the dark tea, the first sip all part of the sensory experience that defined the age. Tea also entered literature, poetry, and art. Novelists described tea scenes to capture domestic warmth, social tension, or genteel refinement. Paintings showed families at tea tables, the intimacy of the moment framed by lamplight and lace. Tea was not just a drink, it was a symbol of Victorian values: order, civility, hospitality, and a touch of indulgence. Consider also the working class. For laborers in factories, tea was no less important. Though they could not afford porcelain or silver, tea remained central. In tin mugs and simple pots, it provided warmth, energy, and comfort after long hours of toil. It was cheaper than beer, safer than water, and carried none of the intoxication of spirits. For the working poor, tea was daily survival, as vital as bread. Imagine a factory worker returning home, his body weary, his hands calloused. His wife pours him a mug of strong, sweet tea. He drinks, sighs, and feels life return. In this way, tea was not only refinement for the wealthy, but sustenance for all. The Victorian tea world was also a place of innovation. New designs in porcelain, new patterns in silver. New blends of teas carried the signature of the era's taste for beauty and novelty. Teapots, shaped like pumpkins or castles, cups, decorated with flowers or pastoral scenes, trays engraved with intricate designs. Owning such items was not only functional but expressive, a way to display one's refinement and place in society. Close your eyes now and step into a Victorian parlor. The fire glows in the grate, shadows dancing on wallpaper patterned with roses. The table is set, a silver teapot gleaming in the light, porcelain cups arranged neatly, a plate of scones steaming beside a dish of clotted cream. The lady of the house pours, her movements graceful, practiced. Guests lift their cups, sip, and smile. Outside, the city bustles with carriages and smoke. But here, in this room, time slows. The world softens into warmth, into conversation, into presence. This was tea in the Victorian era. Elegance in porcelain, sweetness in sugar, strength in black leaves, comfort in ritual. It was the pause in a rushing world, the gathering point in households, the symbol of an empire both celebrated and questioned. Above all, it was continuity, a thread of calm weaving through the lives of millions. By the end of the Victorian age, tea was no longer a luxury or even a fashion, it was an essential. A part of daily existence so natural that life without it seemed unthinkable. And from Britain, this love of tea would continue to spread, carried into colonies, into the modern age. Into every corner of the world where a cup could be brewed and a moment of stillness found. The industrial age transformed tea from a luxury and ritual into a true global necessity. Steamships, railways, and new technologies turned what was once an exotic leaf into a staple that reached households across continents. Where earlier centuries had made tea a symbol of elegance and empire, the 19th and early 20th centuries made it universal, woven into the rhythms of daily life for rich and poor alike. Imagine a bustling dockside in London around the 1860s. Steamships, vast and ironclad, loom in the harbor. Crates of tea are unloaded, stamped with the names of distant places: Assam, Darjeeling, Ceylon, Canton. The air smells of salt and coal smoke, but if you lean close to a freshly opened chest, the fragrance of leaves rises, green, floral, earthy. Merchants hurry, dockhands shout, horses pull carts through narrow streets. Each crate will soon be divided into smaller parcels, bound for shops, tier rooms, and kitchens across Britain. The scale is immense, yet the heart of it remains the same. A leaf brewed into warmth. The power of steamships cannot be overstated. In earlier times, sailing vessels took months to carry tea from Asia to Europe, their voyages long and perilous. With steam, the journey was faster, more reliable, less at the mercy of wind. Railways then carried the tea inland, reaching towns and villages far from ports. Imagine a train chugging through English countryside, smoke trailing against gray skies, its cargo cars heavy with crates of tea. As tracks expanded, even the most remote households could brew a cup that had begun its journey on the other side of the world. Industrialization also transformed tea production itself. Plantations in India and Ceylon grew vast, worked by thousands of laborers. Rows of tea bushes stretched across hillsides in endless green waves. At dawn, women with baskets strapped to their backs plucked the tender top leaves, fingers moving swiftly, rhythmically. The leaves were carried to factories, where new machinery sped the process of rolling, drying, and sorting. What had once been done slowly by hand could now be managed on a scale that matched global demand. Picture a tea factory in Assam around 1900. The air is hot and humid, filled with the smell of fresh leaves. Machines clatter as belts turn, rollers crush, dryers hum. Workers move swiftly, feeding leaves into machines, sorting finished batches into chests. Outside, Carts wait to carry the chests to the nearest rail station. Though the process has changed, the essence remains. Capturing the soul of the leaf, preparing it for the journey from hillside to cup. In the cities of Europe and America, tea drinking reached new levels of accessibility. Working-class families, who once considered tea a luxury, now embraced it as daily sustenance. A mug of strong, sweet tea fueled laborers through long shifts in factories. It was cheaper than alcohol, safer than often polluted water, and warming in drafty homes. For many, tea was survival itself. Imagine a worker in Manchester returning home after 12 hours in a mill. His wife pours him a mug of hot tea, strong and dark, sweetened with sugar. He drinks deeply, the warmth spreading through his tired body. The simple act restores him. At the same time, tea remains central to middle and upper-class rituals. Afternoon tea, perfected in the Victorian age, continued to flourish. Tea rooms multiplied, offering refined spaces for families and ladies to gather. Department stores opened elegant tea salons where shoppers could pause amid the bustle. Imagine stepping into one. Polished wood counters, mirrors reflecting chandeliers, soft clatter of cups, the scent of pastries mixing with the aroma of brewing tea. Here, refinement and accessibility blended, tea becoming both fashionable and familiar. The industrial age also created new inventions around tea. The early 20th century, the tea bag was accidentally popularized in America, when merchants sent samples in small silk bags and customers simply dropped the whole bag into boiling water. The convenience caught on, and soon mass production made tea bags common. Imagine the first person to brew tea this way, surprised by its ease, amused at how quickly the leaves infused, delighted by the simplicity. A small innovation, yet one that transformed tea for millions. Meanwhile, global trade carried tea farther than ever. In Russia, caravans that once brought tea overland were replaced by faster rail shipments, fueling the tradition of samovar brewed tea, served strong and sweet. In the Middle East, mint teas and spiced blends became central to hospitality. In America, iced tea emerged in the hot summers of the South, a refreshing twist on an old ritual. Each culture shaped tea into its own form, yet the essence was universal. Comfort, pause, connection. And still, tea was more than drink. It was ceremony in Japan's chinoyu, elegance in Britain's afternoon teas, sustenance in factories, hospitality in villages. It bridged classes, nations, and traditions. Its journey from hillside to hearth was made swifter by machines, but its meaning remained timeless. Close your eyes and picture yourself in this industrial age of tea. Perhaps you are in a small London home, the fire glowing as a kettle whistles. A mug of strong black tea poured after a long day. Perhaps you are in a Paris salon, where tea is served in delicate porcelain alongside cakes. Perhaps you are on a veranda in Ceylon, watching endless hills of tea bushes sway in the breeze, sipping the very leaves grown beneath your feet. Wherever you are, the leaf has traveled to meet you, carrying centuries of history in each sip. The industrial age made tea universal. It was no longer rare, no longer only aristocratic, no longer only ritual. It was daily life, global, ordinary, yet extraordinary. Factories and parlors, in trains and ships, in mansions and cottages. Tea became what it still is today, a gentle anchor, a pause in the rush, a shared comfort across the world. The 20th century unfolded as an age of immense upheaval. Tea traveled through every corner of it, adjusting, adapting, and remaining faithful to its role as a quiet anchor. Wars, inventions, advertising, and globalization each left their imprint on the leaf. But whether in muddy trenches, crowded factories, suburban kitchens, or roadside stalls, the same gesture of pouring and sipping carried people through. In wartime, tea was more than refreshment, it was survival. During the First World War, British soldiers huddled in cold trenches. Rain seeping into their boots, mud clinging to their uniforms, would heat water in battered tins and steep the leaves until the liquid darkened. To lift a steaming mug in those conditions was to taste not only warmth, but the memory of home. It steadied hands and spirits, reminding each soldier that there was still comfort in the world. When the Second World War came, tea once again became a lifeline. Ships risked dangerous seas to bring it to Britain. Ration books carefully allotted each family their share. And in bomb shelters during the Blitz, mothers poured tea into tin mugs as families huddled together in the dark. The taste was often bitter, the amount meager, yet the meaning profound. Tea was resilience in liquid form. Outside the battlefields, convenience was reshaping tea. In the early part of the century, tea bags born almost by accident when merchants sent samples in silk pouches began to spread. At first they were a novelty, but after the wars, when efficiency and speed became virtues of modern living, they found their place in millions of kitchens. Imagine the small surprise of a housewife in New York or London, who realized she could simply drop the entire pouch into hot water, lift it out, and sip within minutes. The purists scoffed, but the practicality was irresistible. Around the same time, iced tea was rising in popularity in the United States. Though recipes existed before, the hot summer of 1904 in St. Louis cemented the habit as a vendor served chilled tea over ice to grateful fairgoers. By mid-century, pitchers of iced tea sat on porches across America, beads of condensation on the glass, ice cubes clinking a cooling echo of the old warmth. The new age of advertising ensured that tea was no longer only a tradition, but also a brand. Lipton, Tetley, Brook Bond, and others turned the leaf into a household name. Posters, jingles, and television spots carried images of smiling families, polished kitchens, and steaming pots, each one promising reliability and comfort. A box of tea became not only leaves in a package, but a symbol of trust, part of the fabric of modern domestic life. In Britain, advertisements emphasized continuity tea as the backbone of daily existence, the pause in factory and home alike. In America, campaigns leaned into the refreshing image of iced tea. In India, where tea had long been grown for export, advertising began to urge locals to drink it themselves, and by the mid-century, chai strong, spiced, sweet had become a national ritual, shared at every street corner stall. In Britain, the tea break was formalized in factories and offices, turning a personal habit into an institutional rhythm. Workers paused at 10 and again at 4. The arrival of a tea trolley bringing not only refreshment but conversation, laughter, and a brief escape from machines. Offices too found that tea broke down barriers. Colleagues gathered around kettles or trolleys, cups in hand, their talk drifting from work to life. In households, the pot on the table still signaled hospitality. Friends still could not be properly received without a cup, and families still ended long days by sipping together in warmth. In India, roadside chai stalls became gathering places where rich and poor stood shoulder to shoulder, sipping from tiny clay cups, sharing news and stories. In Russia, families continued to cluster around their samovars, pouring strong tea into glasses, sweetened with jam or sugar, steam rising into cold rooms. Across cultures, tea remained what it had always been, the pause that connected. The 20th century also brought endless variation. Blends like English breakfast and Earl Grey became global staples, while herbal infusions, chamomile, peppermint, hibiscus offered alternatives without caffeine. In supermarkets, shelves grew crowded with boxes, each promising a new flavor, a new mood. For some, tea was still black and strong, softened by milk and sugar. For others, it was green, delicate, and refreshing. For still others, it was spiced, floral, or even fruity. The options expanded, but the core ritual never changed. And yet, amid the noise of industry, the rush of modern life, the shadow of wars, tea retained its ancient gentleness. An elderly couple in the 1980s, seated in a quiet home, shared a pot just as they had in their youth. They poured, sipped, and sat together, silent but connected, steam curling softly between them. Around them, the world blazed with change. Televisions, cars, jet planes, skyscrapers, but in that small act, they shared something timeless. Wherever you place yourself in the 20th century, soldiers in muddy fields, workers in factories, families at kitchen tables, travelers on porches with iced glasses, strangers at chai stalls, the meaning is always the same. A cup of tea was comfort. A cup of tea was continuity. A cup of tea was community. It was no longer exotic, no longer rare, no longer reserved for courts or ceremonies. It had become ordinary, and in its ordinariness, extraordinary. In our contemporary world, tea has continued its long journey, adapting yet again to new rhythms, new tastes, and new ways of living. Where once it was a courtly luxury, and later a necessity of industry, today it has become both a daily habit and a conscious choice. Tea now lives at the intersection of tradition and modernity, wellness and indulgence, quiet ritual and global commerce. Picture a modern kitchen, its counters lined with stainless steel appliances, a kettle humming quietly. The shelves hold not only boxes of familiar black tea, but also rows of herbal infusions, green teas from Japan, oolongs from Taiwan, and wellness blends, promising calm or energy. A person stands, choosing carefully. Will it be a brisk breakfast tea to start the day, or a calming chamomile before bed? 8. Each choice feels intentional, a way of shaping one's moment. The act of boiling water, of pouring it over leaves, remains unchanged, but the meaning is more varied than ever. In the digital age, tea has found a place in wellness culture. Green tea is praised for its antioxidants, matcha for its energy and calm, herbal teas for their soothing effects. In yoga studios and mindfulness centers, tea is served as part of meditation, sip reminding the drinker to slow down, to breathe. Imagine sitting cross-legged on a mat after a quiet class, a small cup of warm tea in your hands. The steam rises, fragrant with jasmine or peppermint, grounding you in the present. Tea has become a companion not only to conversation, but also to self-care. At the same time, specialty tea culture has flourished. Just as coffee developed its third wave of connoisseurs, tea has drawn enthusiasts who seek single origin leaves, precise brewing methods, and rare varieties. In urban tea houses from New York to Berlin, baristas serve carefully measured infusions, timing the steeping to the second, presenting cups with the same reverence given to fine wine. Imagine sitting in such a space. Minimalist shelves of glass jars, the sound of water pouring with care, the host explaining the origin of the leaves in your cup. Each sip is not only refreshment, but education, connection to soil, to farmer, to history. And yet, even with this refinement, tea remains profoundly ordinary. In offices, kettles still boil during breaks. Mugs still sit on desks beside keyboards. Workers still pause with colleagues for a chat over tea. In homes, families still end meals with pots passed around. Children still dunk biscuits into mugs. In villages across Asia, Africa, and South America, tea is still poured into simple cups and shared without ceremony, the same comfort it has always been. Modern globalization has also created cross-cultural blends. Chai from India has become beloved worldwide. Matcha lattes are found in from Tokyo to Los Angeles. Moroccan mint tea is poured in European restaurants as often as in Marrakesh courtyards. Tea has traveled and transformed, and in every place it has been adopted, it has been reshaped, carrying local flavors and meanings. The digital age has also reshaped the social side of tea. It's on platforms and communities online. Tea drinkers share rituals, post photos of their setups, trade notes on brewing. A cup of tea, once private, now also belongs to a global conversation. Yet at the same time, tea continues to serve its oldest purpose. To slow, to pause, to connect. Imagine yourself now in a quiet evening, phone set aside, the hum of the world muted. A kettle whistles softly. You pour hot water into a teapot. Watch leaves swirl and unfurl, releasing their fragrance. The room fills with warmth. You lift the cup, inhale, sip. The taste is familiar, comforting, timeless. For all the changes of technology, trade, and fashion, the essence remains unchanged. In contemporary culture, tea is both ancient and new. It is the heritage of dynasties and empires, and the personal choice of someone seeking calm before bed. It is in tea bags, in supermarkets, and in ceremonial bowls whisked in temples. It is in the hands of a yoga teacher, a factory worker, a grandmother, a student, a traveler. It belongs to everyone, everywhere. Tea today carries all the layers of its journey. The myths of Shennan, the poetry of Thames, the elegance of Song, the porcelain of Ming, the trade of Qing, the rituals of Europe, the rebellions of America, the refinements of Victoria, the resilience of world wars, the branding of modern commerce. And still, in each cup, it is simple: leaf, water, warmth, presence. Close your eyes and feel it. A cup between your hands, steam brushing your face, the world outside carrying on at its relentless pace. And here, inside a pause, a sip, a moment that connects you not only to yourself, but to centuries of humanity across continents and cultures, all finding the same comfort in a leaf steeped in hot water. The story of tea is not finished. Even now, the leaf continues its journey, carried into new landscapes, shaped by climate innovation, and the choices of those who drink it. The past shows us tea as a healer, a ritual, a commodity, and a comfort. The future asks us to imagine what it will become in an age of sustainability, technology, and changing culture. In the coming decades, climate change will touch tea at its roots. The hillsides of Assam, Darjeeling, Yunnan, Hinda, and Kenya, places where tea has thrived for centuries, are already seeing shifts in rainfall and rising temperatures. Too much rain floods roots. Too little stunts growth. Warmer air alters the delicate balance that gives each tea its distinct flavor. Imagine walking through a tea plantation of the future. Rows of bushes still stretch across the hills. But farmers speak of shorter harvests, of new pests, of the need for adaptation. To preserve the taste of oolong, green, and black teas, growers experiment with shade, new varieties, and sustainable farming practices. The challenge is immense, but so too is the determination to protect this ancient leaf. Sustainability will become the heart of tea's survival. Already, many plantations and companies are turning to organic methods, reducing pesticides, conserving water, and caring for workers as much as for plants. The future cup may carry not only flavor, but also the promise of fairness and respect for land, for labor, for community. Not only listing origin and blend, but also telling you the names of farmers, the method of harvest, the water saved in its production. Drinking tea may one day feel as much an ethical choice as a sensory one. Technology will shape tea as well. In laboratories, scientists are studying the compounds in tea that give it its calming, energizing, or healthful effects. New blends may be designed to target mood, sleep, focus, or even longevity. Imagine a tea tailored for you, a blend crafted from data on your body, your sleep, your needs. The kettle of tomorrow may not only boil water, but also analyze temperature, steep time, and leaf-to-water ratio to give you the perfect cup every time. Already, smart teapots exist. In the future, they may be as common as smartphones. But for all the innovation, tea's essence will remain the same. Leaf, water, warmth, pause. The rituals may evolve, but the heart of tea is too simple, too human to vanish. In cities of tomorrow, where lives may be faster still, tea will remain the pause. Offices of the future may schedule mindful tea breaks. Homes may still end evenings with a cup shared in silence. Online communities may gather virtually, each person holding their own cup, connected by steam rising into different skies. Tea will also continue to be a bridge between cultures. Globalization has already made matcha lattes and masala chai familiar in cities worldwide. The future will deepen this sharing. Imagine a tea room in 2050, where Moroccan mint is served alongside Japanese matcha, Indian chai, and South African rooibos. Each table tells a story of land and tradition, yet all are bound by the same gesture: pouring, sipping, pausing. And perhaps tea will also become more personal than ever. As wellness grows, people may return to the oldest idea of tea as medicine, not in the bitter broths of Shennan's day, but in intentional choices. A calming herbal tea before bed, stimulating green tea in the morning, a soothing blend after illness. The cup will once again be not only comfort but care. Close your eyes and imagine the future of tea. The world outside may be louder, busier, more uncertain. In your hands is a cup, steam rising, scent filling the air. The leaves may have come from fields tended by sustainable methods, shipped in carbon-free vessels, blended with care for your well-being. The taste may be ancient, yet the path it took to reach you is shaped by the future. You sip, and in that moment, you feel both the weight of history and the hope of tomorrow. The future of tea is uncertain, as all futures are. But one thing seems sure. As long as humans seek comfort, connection, and pause, tea will endure. It has survived dynasties, wars, revolutions, industries, and empires. It will survive the challenges to come. The leaf will continue its quiet journey, carrying with it the same promise it has always held, that in every sip, there is warmth, there is stillness, there is presence. Tea's journey into Russia gave the drink a new character, one shaped by cold winters, long roads, and the warmth of community. While tea reached Western Europe by sea, in Russia it arrived slowly, carried by caravans that crossed vast distances from China. By the 17th century, tea was filtering into Moscow, and by the 18th, it had become a national companion. Russians embraced tea so fully that it wove itself into their culture in a way distinct from anywhere else in the world. Imagine a caravan on the old Siberian trade routes. Camels plod steadily through snow-covered plains, their breath misting in the frigid air. Wooden chests of tea are stacked high, wrapped in cloth, strapped with rope. The journey is long, months across deserts and mountains, but eventually, the leaves arrive in Russian towns. When the chests are opened, the scent of tea drifts into rooms lit by candles, a promise of warmth against the cold. In Russia, tea became inseparable from the samovar, the great metal urn designed to keep water hot for hours. Polished brass or silver, the samovar sat at the center of the table, its chimney puffing gently, its spigot ready to fill cup after cup. Inside, a strong concentrate of tea called zavarka, brewed in a small teapot balanced on top. To drink, each person poured a little of the strong brew into their glass and diluted it with hot water from the spout. This method meant tea could be sipped endlessly, refilled again and again, keeping conversation alive deep into the night. Picture a Russian family on a winter evening. Snow falls thickly outside, muffling the world in silence. Inside, the samovar hums softly, a faint hiss of steam rising. Round the table sit parents, children, perhaps a visiting neighbor. The mother pours a little zavarka into each glass, adds hot water, and passes them around. Some stir in sugar, others a spoonful of jam, dissolving sweetness into the dark tea. The family sips, warmth spreading through their bodies. Conversation flows stories of the day, of the past, of dreams for tomorrow. In this moment, tea is not just drink, but presence, a companion to togetherness. Tea houses also thrived in Russia's cities. In Moscow and St. Petersburg, travelers could rest at Chany Dom, where samovars steamed from morning to night. Merchants conducted business, friends met, strangers shared tables. The tea was strong, often sweet, sometimes paired with rings of bread or plates of sweets. Imagine stepping inside such a house in the late 19th century. The clink of glasses, the hiss of samovars, the soft murmur of voices blending with the faint strains of balalika music. Outside, the cold bites, but here, inside, tea makes the world warm. Tea in Russia also became a symbol of hospitality. To offer a guest, tea was to welcome them fully, to extend warmth and respect. Refusing tea was almost unheard of. To drink together was to share trust. Even the humblest home would set the samovar at the center of the table, ensuring that every visitor left warmed and comforted. Through centuries of change czars, revolutions, wars, the samovar and the act of pouring tea remained. Soldiers on the front carried tea as their comfort, just as peasants in villages and nobles in palaces did. Even as samovars gave way to electric kettles, the rhythm of zavarka and hot water endured, passed from one generation to the next. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself in a Russian home. The snow presses against the windows, the fire crackles in the stove, the samovar glows with heat. You hold a glass of tea in your hands, the warmth seeping into your palms. You stir in a spoonful of jam, sip, and feel the sweetness spread. Around you, laughter rises, stories flow, the night deepens. Outside, winter reigns, but inside, the world is warm and tea has made it so. Russia gave tea its own soul, shaping it into a ritual of endurance, hospitality, and endless conversation. It was not refined like the ceremonies of Japan, nor brisk like the cups of England. It was slow, sustaining, a companion to life in a vast land. And in that way, tea in Russia became not just a drink, but a symbol of warmth in the face of cold, of community in the face of hardship, of constancy in a world that often shifted and shook. Tea's arrival in the Middle East and North Africa gave it new colors, new scents, and a new role. Here, tea became inseparable from hospitality, transformed with mint, sugar, spices, and ceremony into something both refreshing and profound. From Moroccan courtyards to Egyptian, from Turkish bazaars to desert tents, tea grew into a ritual that defined welcome, friendship, and community. Imagine stepping into a Moroccan home on a bright afternoon. The courtyard is shaded by orange trees, the air warm with sun. A tray is brought out, shining with silver, holding a tall pot and small glasses. Fresh mint is stuffed into the pot with green tea leaves, and boiling water is poured over. Sugar, often in large, solid cubes, added generously. The pot is lifted high as the tea is poured, a long arc of liquid falling into each glass. The foam that rises on top is a sign of respect, a mark of care. Guests lift their glasses, sip the hot, sweet, minty tea, and conversation begins. This is not only drink, it is welcome itself. In the Maghreb, tea is life. It is served at all hours to guests and family alike. Refusing tea is rare, almost unthinkable, because to share it is to share connection. Imagine the rhythm of a Moroccan day. Morning tea with breakfast bread. Afternoon tea with nuts or sweets. Evening tea as the family gathers under the stars. Each glass carries warmth and sweetness, each pour a gesture of belonging. Travel eastward, and tea takes other forms. In Turkey, TK is everywhere. Instead of mint, it is strong black tea, steeped in double-stacked pots called kadanlek. The lower pot holds the concentrate, stark and rich, while the upper pot holds hot water for dilution. Poured into small tulip-shaped glasses, Turkish tea is bold, reddish, and often sweetened with sugar cubes. Imagine a Turkish bazaar, vendors calling out, carpets and spices displayed. And at every stall, a steaming glass of tea is offered to visitors. Business is not done without it. Conversations do not begin without it. The clink of small spoons against glass is as much a part of the market music as the calls of merchants. In Egypt and the Levant, tea is also deeply rooted in daily life. It may be plain black tea, sweetened heavily, sometimes flavored with fresh mint or sage. In Cairo, tea houses hum with life. Men gather to sip tea while playing backgammon, the sound of dice rattling on wooden boards. Students linger with books, writers find inspiration, friends gather to talk late into the night. Tea in these places is not only refreshment, but atmosphere, a backdrop to the life of the city. Travel farther into the Arabian deserts, and tea finds its place alongside coffee as a symbol of hospitality. Bedouin hosts may prepare black tea spiced with cardamom or cloves, or served in small glasses to travelers who arrive at their tents. Imagine a desert night, stars spread across an endless sky, fire crackling in the sand. A small pot of tea simmers beside the fire, its fragrance rising into the cool air. Glasses are passed around, each sip warming against the chill. To be offered tea here is to be welcomed fully, to be treated not as a stranger, but as a guest of honor. Tea in North Africa and the Middle East is rarely hurried. It is about more than thirst. It is about pause, about connection. To prepare it is to show care. To pour it is to extend friendship. To drink it is to share presence. The sweetness, the fragrance, the ceremony, all remind the drinker that life is not only about motion, also about moments of stillness and togetherness. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself in one of these places. Perhaps in a Moroccan courtyard holding a glass of mint tea so sweet it sparkles on your tongue. Perhaps in a Turkish market, sipping black tea from a tulip-shaped glass while bargaining for a rug. Perhaps in a Cairo cafe, glass in hand, laughter and dice clattering all around you. Or perhaps in a desert camp, the stars vast above, tea warming you against the night. In each setting, tea is the same leaf, but also something new, transformed by land, by people, by tradition. In the Middle East and North Africa, tea became not just a drink, but a language of welcome. A way to say, you are home here, you belong. It carried sweetness, warmth, and connection through every glass, reminding all who sipped that, even in the harshest deserts or busiest cities, a pause with tea could make the world gentle again. In South Asia, tea took on a life of its own, while the British planted it in India and Sri Lanka as a crop for empire. The people of the region transformed it into chaya drink so beloved that it became more than a beverage. It became rhythm, ritual, heartbeat, strong, spiced, sweet, and shared. Chai today is one of the most widely enjoyed forms of tea on earth. When the British East India Company began cultivating tea in Assam and Darjeeling during the 19th century, their purpose was profit. Vast plantations spread across the hillsides, worked by laborers who plucked tender leaves from dawn until dusk. At first, tea was meant for export, shipped back to Britain and Europe. But slowly, Indians began to drink it themselves, shaping it into something new. They did not sip it plain as the British did. They boiled the leaves in milk and water, added sugar, and flavored it with cardamom, ginger, cinnamon, or cloves. Wow! What emerged was chaya, drink robust, aromatic, and comforting in every season. Imagine a roadside stall in India, the kind found on every street corner. A small clay stove burns with coal or wood, a metal pot perched above it. The vendor, or chaiwala, pours water and milk together, drops in handfuls of black tea leaves, adds sugar, and stirs. The air fills with fragrance as ginger slices and cardamom pods are crushed and dropped into the pot. The mixture boils, bubbles, froths. Finally, the tea is strained into small glasses or clay cups, steaming and sweet. Customers gather, rickshaw drivers, office workers, students, travelers, each cradling a cup, each sipping slowly, each pausing from their day. The scene repeats in every town, every village, every city. Chai is not just drink, it is community. In Pakistan and Bangladesh, chai culture is equally strong. On busy streets, vendors pour tea from pot to glass with long arcs, creating froth as they mix. Sweetness is generous, milk rich, spice warming. In Bangladesh, spiced tea is poured into glasses layered with condensed milk, creating colorful stripes of flavor. In Pakistan, strong doodh patiti boiled in milk until thick and creamy is cherished. Families gather around it, guests are always offered it, and no meeting feels complete without it. Darjeeling, meanwhile, gave the world one of its most prized teas. Grown in the misty Himalayan foothills, Darjeeling tea is light, floral, and delicate. Often called the champagne of teas. Imagine sipping it on a cool mountain morning, the slopes around you cloaked in fog, the air crisp with pine and earth. Each cup tastes of the altitude, the soil, the mist itself. Yet even this refined tea finds its way into daily cups, mixed with milk and sugar, reminding us that in South Asia, tea is both luxury and ordinary comfort. In Sri Lanka, once called Ceylon under colonial rule, tea plantations still cover the highlands, their leaves forming seas of green. Ceylon tea is bold and brisk, exported worldwide, but also cherished locally. Imagine standing on a hillside in Kandy, rows of bushes stretching endlessly, workers with baskets plucking leaves, and in the town below, small serving cups of steaming black tea. The drink that began as empire's crop became the nation's identity, woven into both economy and daily life. But beyond the plantations, the true heart of South Asian tea lies in the countless cups shared every day. Families prepare chai at home, pouring it into steel tumblers, sipping it with breakfast or in the evening with snacks. Travelers pause at stalls, hands wrapped around glasses that warm their fingers. Friends linger over cups, conversations flowing as easily as the tea. Even strangers offered a cup find themselves suddenly connected. Close your eyes and imagine yourself in South Asia now. You stand at a crowded train station, the air filled with shouts, whistles, and movement. Amid the noise, a chaiwala calls out, pouring tea into small clay cups. You take one, the surface steaming, the clay rough against your fingers. You sip, and sweetness floods your tongue. Spice warms your throat. Strength steadies your body. Round you, thousands move, but for a moment, you are grounded. The tea has found you. South Asia gave tea not only new flavors, but a new meaning. It became chai, a symbol of warmth, of belonging, of life shared. It was no longer the empire's crop, it was the people's drink. And in every corner, from Himalayan slopes to desert towns, from village huts to city markets, chai continues to remind millions each day of the same truth. Tea is not only comfort, but connection. In East Asia, tea has never been simply a drink. It has always been culture, philosophy, and art. In modern times, as the world changes around it, tea in China, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan continues to hold its deep traditions, while also finding new expressions. Old rituals live on, but alongside them, new trends and practices have emerged, keeping tea alive in the present while honoring its past. In China, tea remains a cornerstone of daily life. Green teas like Longjing and Biluocan, oolongs from Fujian, pu'er from Yunnan are still cherished. Imagine a family in Hangzhou preparing Longjing tea. Fresh leaves, pale green and flat, are placed in a glass, and hot water is poured. The leaves dance, rising and falling, releasing fragrance as delicate as spring air. This is not only refreshment, but a way of pausing, of remembering balance. In modern cities, tea houses still serve traditional brews, yet side by side with bubble tea shops buzzing with young customers sipping sweet milk teas through straws. Old and new stand together. One bowl carrying centuries of culture, one cup carrying modern playfulness, both still tea. In Japan, the tea ceremony remains an art of harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. Picture a quiet tea room, tatami mats beneath, sliding doors letting in filtered light. A host kneels, preparing matcha with slow, deliberate movements. The whisk hums softly, the froth rises, the bowl is offered with both hands. To participate is to step out of the rush of life into a moment of mindfulness. Yet outside this traditional world, Japan also thrives on modern tea culture. Bottled green tea is sold in vending machines, chilled and ready for a busy commuter. Serve matcha lattes, blending old flavors with new styles. In Kyoto, tourists line up to taste sweets flavored with matcha. The ceremony and the convenience exist together, both carrying tea into daily life. In Korea, tea culture is quieter, often tied to meditation and simplicity. Traditional Korean tea houses, known as daban, offer green teas like naka, brewed with care in small cups. Imagine sitting in such a place. Wooden beams overhead, the scent of rice cakes nearby, steam rising gently from your cup. The taste is subtle, vegetal, calming. For many Koreans, tea is tied to health and mindfulness, a way to settle the spirit. At the same time, Korea has also embraced the wave of cafe culture. Modern teas serve flower teas, fruit infusions, and green teas presented with elegance, meeting the desires of a new generation while keeping the old essence intact. Taiwan, perhaps more than anywhere, has brought new life to tea in modern times. The island's high mountains produce some of the world's finest oolongs, teas that taste of orchids, cream, and mist. Imagine sipping Alishan oolong, the leaves rolled tightly, unfurling with each steeping, releasing wave after wave of fragrance. Each infusion carries a new note, a deepening flavor. But Taiwan is also the birthplace of bubble tea, a modern invention that has traveled worldwide. Picture a crowded night market in Taipei, neon lights flashing the air filled with the scent of fried snacks, and in your hands a plastic cup sealed with a lid black. Tapioca pearls at the bottom, milk tea swirling above. You pierce the lid with a straw, sip, and the sweetness, the chew of pearls, the comfort of tea all blend into joy. From ancient mountainsides to modern cities, Taiwan shows how tea can be both heritage and innovation. Across East Asia today, tea lives in duality. It is ancient, ceremonial, spiritual. It is modern, playful, commercial. It can be sipped in silence, in meditation, or gulped joyfully with sugar and pearls. It is served in porcelain bowls, glass bottles, paper cups. Yet in all these forms, the heart remains unchanged. The leaf, the water, the pause it creates. Close your eyes now and place yourself in East Asia today. You may be in a Kyoto tea room, bowing as you accept a bowl of frothy matcha, the silence of the room broken only by the sound of whisking. You may be in a Shanghai tea house, watching leaves swirl in your glass, breathing in the fragrance of spring. You may be in a soul cafe, sipping floral tea while the city hums outside. Or you may be in a Taipei night market, bubble tea in hand, lights and sounds rushing around you. In each place, the form differs, but the comfort is the same. The tea grounds you, connects you, reminds you that even in the modern age, there is still time to pause, still warmth to share. East Asia today shows us that tea does not need to choose between past and present. It can be both. It can be a sacred ceremony and a sweet street drink, a 1,000-year-old oolong and a brand new invention. And in this way, tea continues its journey, not as something fading, but as something living, changing, and always present. Tea found in Africa a new home, a land of wide skies and fertile soil, where it would flourish into one of the world's most important producers. Though tea's roots were in China and India, Africa embraced it and made it its own. From the highlands of Kenya to the hills of Malawi, from the plantations of Uganda to the rooibos fields of South Africa, Africa today is as much a land of tea as any other. In Kenya, tea became not just a crop, but a lifeline of the nation. British colonists first planted it in the early 20th century, and the soil and climate of the Kenyan highlands proved almost perfect. Today, Kenya is one of the largest exporters of black tea in the world. Imagine standing on a hillside near Kericho at dawn. The land is bright with green, rolling fields of tea bushes stretching as far as the eye can see. Women with baskets strapped to their backs walk the rows, plucking tender leaves with swift, practiced hands. The air is cool, the sun just beginning to rise. By mid-morning, the baskets are full. The leaves carried to factories where they are withered, rolled, dried, and sorted. The final product will travel across oceans to be poured into cups in London, Cairo, New York, and beyond. Yet here in these fields, it is simply life, the daily rhythm of thousands of workers and families. Malawi and Uganda, too, embrace tea cultivation. In Malawi, one of the oldest African tea industries, leaves from the Shire Highlands have been exported for more than a century. The teas are strong, brisk, often blended into breakfast teas worldwide. Uganda's tea, grown on the shores of Lake Victoria and in the hills of Fort Portal, has become a major part of its economy. In both countries, as in Kenya, tea is not only export, but also daily drink. Workers brew strong black tea with milk and sugar, served hot and sweet, a comfort after long hours in the fields. And then there is South Africa, where tea means something unique. Rooibos. It's not a true tea leaf, but an herb native to the Cederberg Mountains. Rooibos has a deep red color and a naturally sweet, earthy taste. It is caffeine-free, rich in minerals, and beloved across the country. Imagine a South African kitchen in the evening. The kettle whistles, rooibos is steeped in a pot, the liquid glowing red in the cup. Families gather. Children drink it alongside parents, comforted by its gentle warmth. Rooibos has become not only a household drink, but also a global phenomenon, sold in supermarkets across continents. In Morocco and North Africa, tea culture had already taken root centuries earlier, shaped by mint and sugar. But in sub-Saharan Africa, tea was more a product of colonial planting, yet over time, it became part of African life. In villages, sweet milky tea is shared at gatherings, offered to guests as hospitality. In towns, it is sold on streets by vendors who pour it from kettles into glasses, frothing it with a flourish. For many, tea is not only export wealth but also daily warmth, a pause in the midst of work and conversation. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself in Africa with tea.
Perhaps you are in Kenya watching the sunrise over endless rows of bushes, the air filled with dew and birdsong.
Perhaps you are in Malawi, sipping a strong cup as the afternoon heat fades. Perhaps you are in a South African home, rooibos steaming red in your cup as the family laughs around the table. Or perhaps you are in a Ugandan village, sharing sweet tea with neighbors beneath a tree. In each place, tea is not foreign, it belongs. It has been taken into the soil, into the culture, into the heart. Africa gave tea both scale and soul. Its fields now supply millions of cups every day across the world, while its own people have made it part of their daily lives. From the brisk strength of Kenyan black to the gentle sweetness of rooibos, Africa's teas reflect its landscapes. Vast, diverse, resilient, and in every sip, there is the warmth of the land and the hands that tended it. When tea crossed into the Americas, it did not arrive as it had in Europe or Asia with centuries of ritual already in place, but instead entered a land of experiment and adaptation. In both North and South America, tea found new expressions shaped by climate, culture, and history. It was sometimes resisted, sometimes transformed, and sometimes replaced by other leaves that carried similar meaning. Yet in every corner, tea or its cousins became companions to daily life. In North America, tea was first embraced by colonists as an extension of European habit. As we've seen in colonial America, it was sipped in parlors, poured at gatherings, and carried the same sense of refinement as in Britain. Yet after the Revolution, with the Boston Tea Party forever marking tea as a symbol of British rule, many Americans turned instead to coffee as a patriotic choice. Still, tea endured, quietly weaving itself into homes across the young nation. In the South, it took on a unique form: iced tea. By the late 19th century, recipes for chilled tea, sweetened with sugar and lemon, were spreading. And by the early 20th century, iced tea had become a Southern staple. Imagine a hot summer day in Georgia or South Carolina. On the porch, a pitcher glistens with condensation. Glasses are filled with ice. Tea is poured, amber and shining. The first sip is sweet, cooling, refreshing against the heat. Iced tea became more than a drink, it became a symbol of Southern hospitality, offered to every guest as naturally as a handshake. In South America, a different tradition thrived, one that paralleled tea but was born of native leaves: yerba mate. From Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, and southern Brazil, mate became the heartbeat of daily life. Made from the dried leaves of the yerba mate plant, it is brewed in a hollowed gourd and sipped through a metal straw called a babala. Imagine a group of friends sitting in a plaza in Buenos Aires, passing a gourd between them. Each sips in turn, the mate strong and grassy, stimulating but grounding. Conversation flows with the sharing. The ritual is not only about the drink, but about the circle it creates, the equality it implies, the bond it strengthens. In Uruguay, mate is carried everywhere on buses, in classrooms, in parks thermos, under arm, gourd in hand, always ready to share. In Brazil, chimarrão, a variant of mate, is drunk, green, and fresh, its taste sharper, more vegetal. In Paraguay, offers another twist, the same leaves brewed cold, often with herbs, creating a refreshing drink for hot days. Each culture has shaped mate into its own form, but in all of them, the meaning is the same: community, connection, sharing. Beyond mate, other herbal infusions also flourished in the Americas. In the Caribbean, hibiscus tea, known as sorrel in Jamaica or agua de Jamaica in Mexico, became beloved for its tart, crimson brew, often sweetened and served chilled. In Central America, cinnamon and lemongrass teas became daily comforts. In the Andes, coca tea was brewed for strength against altitude. While not true tea, these infusions carried the same role: warmth, pause, companionship. By the 20th century, the United States had rediscovered hot tea as well, though never with the same passion as coffee. Still, tea bags, iced tea, and later herbal blends became staples in many homes. Imagine a mid-century American kitchen, a box of Lipton tea bags on the shelf, a pot boiling on the stove. Cups poured after dinner as a simple act of comfort. Not ritual, not protest, just warmth to end the day. Close your eyes and imagine yourself in the Americas with tea. Perhaps you are on a porch in Mississippi, sipping sweet iced tea, the cicadas humming in the heat. Perhaps you are in an Argentine park, passing the gourd of mate from hand to hand, laughter rising with each sip. Perhaps you are in a Caribbean kitchen, pouring hibiscus tea into glasses as its ruby color catches the light. In every place, though the leaves differ, the meaning is familiar. To share tea or something like it is to share life, to connect, to pause. The Americas gave tea new expressions, from the chilled sweetness of Southern iced tea to the communal strength of South American mate, to the hibiscus brews of the Caribbean. Each reflects its land, its people, its rhythm of life. And in each, the same essence remains: a leaf in water, a moment of warmth, a pause that binds us together. When tea reached Oceania, it arrived with settlers, sailors, and colonial trade. But over time, Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands gave the drink their own character, shaping it into daily rituals of comfort, hospitality, and community. In a region defined by wide horizons, coastal breezes, and strong ties of family and mateship, tea became not an exotic luxury but a familiar, grounding presence. In Australia, tea became a daily habit almost as soon as British settlers arrived. The long voyages had carried crates of tea to Sydney and beyond, and in the harsh new land, a hot cup offered comfort and familiarity. Imagine a colonial homestead in the outback, the sun setting over red earth. The day's work done in a bilicana, simple metal pot hung over the campfire. Water boils, tea leaves are tossed in, and the brew is poured into enamel mugs. This is Billy tea, rough and simple but cherished. It is not poured with ceremony, but shared as a necessity, a way to bring warmth to lonely evenings and strength to weary bodies. By the 20th century, tea in Australia was part of every household. Strong black tea, often with milk and sugar, was drunk at breakfast, during breaks at work, and at social gatherings. Even today, to put the kettle on is a phrase that means more than making a drink. It means creating a moment of pause, an act of welcome. Imagine a modern Australian home. A friend visits, and before shoes are even off, the host is already boiling water, asking, "Cup of tea." It is not question but instinct, a way of saying, "Sit, stay, you're welcome here." In New Zealand, tea has a similar place. Settlers brought it, and it quickly became woven into both domestic and social life. By the late 19th century, New Zealand was one of the highest per capita consumers of tea in the world. Strong black tea, often English breakfast or similar blends, was the staple. Imagine a farmhouse on the South Island, the wind rattling against the windows, the kettle whistling on the stove. The family gathers, tea poured into sturdy mugs, scones or biscuits set on the table. The scene is simple, unpretentious, but deeply comforting. Tea here is not only about flavor but about gathering, about making even the coldest day feel warm. The Mbori, too, embraced tea, incorporating it into their hospitality alongside traditional foods. To offer tea to a guest became as natural as offering bread or meat, a gesture of inclusion. Over time, tea became part of the fabric of Maori gatherings, poured in kitchens, shared in halls, a quiet link between cultures. Across the Pacific Islands, tea also spread, though often in the form of sweet, milky black tea, served hot and strong. In Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga, tea became a part of family life, shared in homes and during social gatherings. Imagine sitting in a village in Fiji, surrounded by laughter and music, a cup of sweet tea passed into your hands. It is not elaborate, but it carries the same meaning. You are welcome. You are part of the circle. What is striking in Oceania is the informality of tea. Unlike the elaborate ceremonies of Japan or the refinement of Victorian England, tea in Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific is unpretentious. It is often strong, simple, sometimes sweet, always shared. The ritual is less about performance and more about presence. It is about pausing together, about grounding life in a cup of warmth. Close your eyes and imagine yourself in Oceania. Perhaps you are under the vast stars of the outback, sitting by a campfire, enamel mug in hand, the smoky taste of billy tea mingling with the cool night air. Perhaps you are in a New Zealand farmhouse, the table crowded with family, tea poured as the rain beats against the roof. Perhaps you are in a Pacific Island village, surrounded by music, cradling a cup of sweet tea that connects you instantly to the people around you. In every place, the essence is the same. Tea is not fancy, not distant. It is immediate, close, human. In Oceania, tea became not just a habit but a way of expressing openness, mateship, and home. It belongs to workers on break, two families gathered at the table, two travelers resting by a fire. It is a small comfort in a vast land, and a reminder that even in the most distant corners of the world, the leaf has found a place in the heart. Tea has not only been brewed in pots and cups, it has also been poured into pages. Across centuries, poets, novelists, and storytellers have reached for tea as a symbol, a setting, a companion. In literature, tea is rarely just a drink, it is atmosphere, pause, conversation, and meaning. Writers have turned to it as shorthand for intimacy, for comfort, for the small gestures that carry weight in human life. In classical Chinese poetry, tea was a subject of devotion. Tang and Song poets wrote of its fragrance, its clarity, its ability to quiet the mind. Imagine a scholar sitting by candlelight, brush in hand, tea steaming beside him. He compares the rising mist of his cup to morning clouds, the taste on his tongue to spring blossoms. For these poets, tea was more than sensoriet, was spiritual. It became metaphor for harmony, for the fleeting beauty of life, for clarity of thought. The words carried tea-s stillness into verses that could be read and reread, like sips taken slowly. In Japanese literature, tea appears not only as drink, but as practice. The tea ceremony, with its deliberate movements and quiet grace, has been described in writings that treat it as both art and philosophy. Novelists and poets alike use the setting of a tea room as a stage for subtle emotion, a gesture of offering a bowl, a pause in conversation. The way steam curled in the silence, these became the texture of storytelling. Tea embodied the values of harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility, words that also framed character and scene. In English literature, tea became the marker of civility, of domestic life, of the rhythms of home. The Victorian novel is filled with tea tables, where characters gather, where tensions surface beneath polite conversation, where comfort or disappointment is served alongside the pot. Imagine the works of Jane Austen, where cups of tea carry as much meaning as dialogue, where to pour for another is to show care, where refusal is impolite, and where the ritual itself creates a space for relationships to unfold. In Dickens, too, tea appears as refuge, as the warmth that softens poverty and hardship. The simple pot becomes the symbol of survival, of kindness, of small graces in a world often harsh. Russian literature, with its sprawling novels and deep emotions, found in tea a domestic anchor. In Tolstoy's pages, families gather around samovars. Conversations stretching into the night, characters revealing themselves over glass after glass of strong tea. Dostoevsky's characters, too, sit with steaming cups, their anxieties and philosophies pouring out as freely as the liquid. The samovar becomes a symbol of endurance, of the Russian household, of the way tea binds even amidst turmoil. Modern literature has also found space for tea. In 20th century works, it appears in quiet scenes, in modern kitchens, in poems of ordinary life. For some writers, tea is nostalgia reminder of childhood, of mothers and grandmothers pouring cups in kitchens filled with love. For others, it is metaphor for patience, for waiting, for the way time itself steeps us. Close your eyes and imagine a scene from any novel, any poem. Character sits, alone or with others, a cup of tea in hand. The room may be candlelit or filled with sunlight, the tea strong or delicate, the moment fleeting or heavy with meaning. The drink grounds the scene, making it tangible, relatable, gives the reader something to hold, to smell, to taste, even in imagination. In literature, tea has always been more than liquid. It has been a symbol of stillness and chaos, of ritual and routine, of comfort and hardship. It has carried with it the same meaning it carries in life, that the small act of pouring and sipping can hold within it entire worlds of connection, memory, and reflection. Painters of the Tang and Song dynasties often depicted scholars in gardens, a teapot by their side, cups resting on low tables as bamboo swayed overhead. These were not casual details, they signaled refinement, serenity, the harmony of man and nature. To hold it was to feel the hand of the maker, the touch of time, the truth of impermanence. In this way, tea became art not through decoration, but through the essence of things. In the Islamic world, tea found expression in design and ornament. Tall silver teapots engraved with intricate patterns gleamed on trays, alongside small glasses painted with gold. In Morocco, the act of pouring tea from a great height was itself performance, kind of living art. The curves of the pot, the sparkle of the glass. The foam that rose with each pourthese were aesthetic gestures, making the ritual not only taste, but spectacle. In Europe, tea inspired painters and designers from the 17th century onward. Dutch still-life painters captured porcelain cups, silver spoons, and steaming pots with luminous care. Their canvases meditations on luxury, transience, and the pleasures of life. In England, teapots became canvases for artisans, shaped like fruits, animals, or classical urns. Painted with pastoral scenes or delicate florals, to own such a pot was to display artistry as much as hospitality. Modern art, too, has found space for tea. In the 20th century, painters like Mary Cassatt portrayed women at tea tables, capturing the intimacy of the ritual. Contemporary artists in Asia and beyond have used tea leaves, tea stains, even entire teapots as materials for installation and sculpture, exploring themes of memory, history, and identity. Imagine an exhibition room where walls are stained with brewed tea, their colors shifting from pale gold to deep brown, the fragrance still lingering. The artwork is not static but alive, just as tea is alive in its steeping. Ceramics remain one of tea's greatest artistic legacies. The Yixing teapots of China, the raku bowls of Japan, the porcelain of Jingdezhen, the painted wares of Europol remind us that to drink tea is also to hold art in our hands. Every vessel carries its maker's vision, every glaze reflects light differently. Every shape affects the taste of the tea itself. Tea's art is not distant on a wall it is touched, lifted, sipped from, lived with. Close your eyes now and imagine tea as art around you. A scroll of calligraphy hanging above a low table where a teapot rests. A porcelain cup painted with cranes, its surface glowing as steam curls upward. A silver Moroccan pot, its engravings catching the light as tea arcs into a glass. A raku bowl, rough beneath your fingers, yet perfect in its imperfection. Each object, each detail, transforms tea from mere drink into aesthetic experience, reminding us that beauty can be found in the smallest gestures of daily life. Tea and art are inseparable. Both seek harmony, both seek to capture fleeting moments, both invite us to slow and to see. And in every age, in every culture, art has given tea form, while tea has given art spirit. Tea has not only been sipped in silence or spoken over at tables, it's also been sung about, celebrated, and carried into music. Across cultures, the rhythms of tea have entered songs, performances, and melodies, turning the simple act of drinking into something heard as much as tasted. Music like tea brings people together, slows the heart, and lingers in memory. And when the two meet, they create a harmony of sound and ritual. In China, ancient tea gatherings often included music. Scholars and poets would sit in gardens, cups before them, while zithers and flutes played softly in the background. The sound of the gukina 7-stringed instrument, known for its meditative tones, was considered the perfect companion to tea. Imagine such a gathering. A table of friends beneath willow trees, tea steaming gently, and the slow, thoughtful notes of the gukin floating through the air. Each sip, each note carried the same quality of stillness, reminding those present that life is richest when savored slowly. In Japan, too, music found its way into the tea ceremony. While the ritual itself was often conducted in silence, the broader culture surrounding it was infused with poetry and song. The rhythm of the whisk, the sound of water poured into a bowl. Even the quiet footsteps of the host were said to form a kind of music, subtle, restrained, but deeply present. Outside the formal ceremony, folk songs about tea picking, sung by women in the fields during harvest season, filled the countryside. Their voices rose in unison as hands plucked leaves, carrying both labor and joy into melody. In the Middle East and North Africa, where mint tea is central to hospitality, music and tea often meet in. Picture a Cairo coffee house in the mid-20th century, men playing oud and tambourine, voices singing traditional songs, and at every table, glasses of sweet black tea. The music fills the air, but so too does the fragrance of mint and sugar, the two blending into one atmosphere of warmth and presence. Tea is not the subject, but it is the backdrop, the silent partner in the song. In Europe, tea became part of salon culture, where gatherings often included performances of piano, violin, or voice. In Victorian England, tea was taken while young ladies played the piano for guests. The ritual of pouring and the performance of music weaving together. Even popular songs celebrated tea. Tea for Two, written in the 1920s, became a classic, its lighthearted lyrics capturing the intimacy of sharing a pot. The fact that tea appeared in song lyrics showed how deeply it was embedded in daily life. A symbol not of extravagance but of simple companionship. In Russia, the samovar stood at the center of domestic life, and around it, music was often played. Families gathered in the evening, drinking tea while singing folk songs that carried the soul of the countryside. Imagine a village home, fire glowing, the samovar steaming, and voices rising together in harmony. The tea warms their bodies, the music warms their spirits. Both are shared without distinction. Both are essential. In modern times, tea continues to inspire music. Musicians write songs about it, jazz singers croon about it, pop lyrics mention it as shorthand for comfort or intimacy. In India, chai vendors call out in rhythmic chants at train stations, their voices forming a kind of music that travelers recognize instantly. In Taiwan, the bustle of bubble tea shops creates its own melody. The tap of shakers, the clatter of pearls, the laughter of customers. The soundscape itself becomes musical, as much a rhythm of tea as any written score. Close your eyes now and imagine tea not only in your hands, but in your ears. The soft pluck of strings in a Chinese garden. The chant of women in Japanese fields. The strum of an oud in a North African cafe. The hum of a piano in a Victorian parlor. The voices of a Russian family singing around their samovar. Calls of chaiwalas on Indian platforms. Each is different, but each carries the same harmony. Tea and music together. Both grounding, both connecting, both flowing into memory. Tea and music is not always about the leaf itself, it is about the space tea creates. A pause for song, a backdrop for gathering, a rhythm to carry labor, a melody to enrich silence. Just as tea is never only drink, music is never only sound. Both are moments that remind us we are human, we are together, we are present. Tea has always been more than taste or warmth. It has been a way of seeing the world. Across cultures, philosophers, sages, and spiritual teachers have turned to tea as metaphor, as practice, as a path toward wisdom. The leaf in water becomes a lesson, the act of drinking a form of meditation, the ritual a philosophy of life itself. In China, tea was embraced by Taoist and Buddhist thinkers as part of the search for balance. Taoists saw tea as harmony with nature, a bridge between body and spirit. A cup of tea carried yin and yang, heat and coolness, bitterness and sweetness, presence and impermanence. Imagine a Taoist sage in the mountains, brewing tea from leaves he gathered himself. He lifts the cup, watching the steam curl upward like mist on peaks. Each sip is not only refreshment but reminder. Life, like tea, must be steeped in patience, savored slowly, accepted as it comes. Buddhism also found tea to be a companion to practice. Monks drank it to stay awake during meditation, but more than that, they saw in its bitterness the lesson of life itself. To taste bitterness was to know suffering. To taste sweetness after was to know release. In Chan and Zen traditions, tea became a form of mindfulness. To boil the water, to place the leaves, to watch them unfurl each step was meditation. The present moment revealed itself in steam rising and fragrance filling the room, and warmth spreading through the body. The leaf taught the mind to be still. In Japan, the tea ceremony became philosophy in action. Chanoyu, shaped by Zen ideals, was never only about drinking. It was about harmony with guests, respect for objects, purity of space, and tranquility of heart. Every gesture, folding a cloth, whisking the bowl, offering the cup was a way of embodying values. Imagine kneeling in a small tea hut, light falling through paper screens. The host moves with calm precision, the sound of whisking like wind through bamboo. The tea is bitter, the bowl simple, the silence profound. In this moment, philosophy is not in words, but in presence. Western philosophy, too, has brushed against tea. Enlightenment thinkers in Europe drank it while writing, seeing in its clarity a spur to thought. For them, tea was fuel for reason, a companion to debate and discovery. Later, Romantic writers saw it as a symbol of domestic peace, of small pleasures carrying deep meaning. While less formalized than in Asia, the West still found in tea an image of balance, civility, and pause. In Russia, tea around the samovar became a philosophy of endurance. Writers and thinkers spoke of the samovar as a symbol of Russian spirit, communal, resilient, unhurried. To drink tea together was to affirm life's continuity, to share strength against hardship. The endless refilling of glasses from the samovar became an image of patience and generosity. Even in modern times, tea carries philosophical weight. In mindfulness practices, to drink tea is often used as an exercise in awareness, feeling the cup in your hands, inhaling its fragrance, tasting it without distraction. Philosophers of everyday life point to tea as an example of how the simplest acts hold the deepest truths. A cup of tea reminds us to slow down, to pay attention, to find presence in the ordinary. Close your eyes and imagine yourself with tea as philosophy. You are not only sipping, you are learning.
The bitterness tells you to accept suffering. The warmth tells you that life too can comfort.
The steam reminds you of impermanence, rising and vanishing. The bowl teaches humility in its simplicity. The act itself teaches patience. Water must boil, leaves must steep, nothing can be rushed. Tea as philosophy tells us that wisdom is not always in grand ideas, but in small acts. To live like tea is to live simply, to steep deeply, to release one's essence quietly into the world. It is to nourish, to comfort, to be present, and then to fade, leaving warmth behind. From its earliest days, tea has been linked not only with pleasure but with healing. Long before it was a daily ritual or a symbol of culture, it was first valued as medicine. Across centuries, physicians, monks, and modern scientists alike have explored tea's power to restore the body, calm the mind, and sustain health. In China, where tea first appeared in legend, its earliest role was medicinal. The story of Shen Nan tells of the emperor tasting herbs to discover their effects, and when tea leaves fell into his pot, he found that the brew revived him. Early texts praised tea for easing fatigue, sharpening thought, and cleansing the body. Doctors of the Han Dynasty wrote of its ability to aid digestion and improve concentration. Buddhist monks drank tea not only to keep them awake through meditation, but also to steady their minds. Its bitterness a tonic against drowsiness. Imagine a monk in a temple courtyard, weary from hours of sitting. He lifts a cup of steaming tea, sips, and feels clarity return. The leaf becomes not indulgence, but medicine for spirit and body. As tea spread to Japan, it retained this role. Zen monks saw it as both spiritual support and bodily aid. Matcha, whisked into froth, was valued for its ability to provide calm alertness, neither restless energy nor heavy sleep. The balance it gave became a form of medicine itself. Tea here was never seen as cure-all, but as part of a healthy rhythm, wakefulness balanced by peace, concentration balanced by rest. In traditional Chinese medicine, tea was often classified according to its nature, cooling or warming, depending on how it interacted with the body's balance. Green teas were thought to cool, easing heat and clearing toxins. Darker teas like pu'er were thought to warm, aiding digestion and strength. To drink tea was to restore harmony, to rebalance what illness or fatigue had unsettled. When tea reached the Middle East and Europe, its medicinal reputation continued. Apothecaries sold it alongside herbs and spices, praising it for digestion, headaches, even melancholy. In 17th century England, pamphlets claimed tea could cure everything from colds to apathy. Physicians debated its properties, but households adopted it as daily remedy. A cup of hot tea was recommended for fevers, for chills, for troubled sleep. It was less about proof and more about the way it made people feel. Steadied, soothed, restored. In the 20th century, as science advanced, researchers began studying tea in detail. They found compounds caffeine, theonin, catechins, antioxidants that gave basis to the old beliefs. Caffeine provided energy, but theanine softened its edge, creating alert calm rather than jitter. Antioxidants in green tea were linked to heart health and longevity. Herbal teas, though not true tea, were found to aid with sleep, digestion, or relaxation. What was once legend now found explanation, though the mystery remained part of its charm. In modern wellness, tea has returned as medicine in gentle form. People drink chamomile to sleep, peppermint to soothe the stomach, ginger to fight nausea. Green tea for energy, rooibos for calm. Doctors may not call it cure, but countless individuals reach for tea before pills, trusting in its warmth as much as its chemistry. Imagine yourself with a cold, the body weary, throat sore. You boil water, drop in ginger and lemon, perhaps honey. Steam clears your head, the heat soothes your throat, the sip strengthens you. It is medicine, not in the harsh sense of drugs, but in the tender sense of care. Tea as medicine is also tea as ritual. The act of preparing it, the waiting, the pouring, the sipping slows the mind, lowers stress, and gives rest. In a world where healing is not only about body but also about spirit, tea offers both. Its very bitterness can remind us of life's trials, its sweetness of life's relief, its warmth of life's endurance. Close your eyes and imagine tea as healing in your own hands. The cup is warm, the fragrance soothing. Sip, and with each swallow you feel lighter, calmer, steadier. Whether the leaf truly cures or not, it heals in another way. By giving presence, by reminding you to pause, by offering the body kindness in liquid form. Tea began as medicine, and though its role has broadened, that origin has never left. Every cup still carries the same quiet power, to restore, to calm, to heal in ways both small and profound. For all the philosophy, art, and ceremony that has surrounded tea, its truest home has always been in the ordinary rhythm of daily life. Beyond courts and temples, beyond salons and tea, lives most deeply in kitchens, workplaces, villages, and family tables. It is here in the quiet spaces of routine that tea reveals its full meaning. Imagine a household in any corner of the world. Morning begins not with noise but with the whistle of a kettle. Pot is set down, cups are arranged, the day starts with warmth. Parents pour tea as children prepare for school. Workers sip quickly before rushing out. In that brief shared moment, tea ties the household together before everyone scatters. The scene is repeated in countless homes across cultures and generations. At midday, tea often returns as a pause. In British factories of the early 20th century, the tea break became part of the rhythm of work. Machinery stopped, a trolley rolled through, mugs were filled, and workers gathered, not only to refresh, but to talk. The same pattern plays out in offices today. Colleagues stand around kettles or machines. Tea in hand, conversations shifting from deadlines to families, laughter softening the day. In this way, tea becomes more than a beverage. It becomes a social glue, a reminder that work must make space for humanity. In rural villages, tea is a sign of hospitality. A guest arrives unannounced, and before words are exchanged, the host is boiling water. A pot is set down, cups are poured, and conversation begins only once tea is shared. This gesture repeats in Morocco, in India, in Russia, in England, in nearly every culture touched by tea. The offering of tea is never only about drink. It is about welcome, about trust, about saying, "You are safe here." For many, tea also marks transitions in the day. It is the mid-afternoon break in Britain, the glass of sweet tea in Egypt, a strong cup of chai at Indian train stations, the steaming mug before bed in countless homes. These moments punctuate time, creating rhythm where otherwise life might blur. Tea is both ordinary and extraordinary in this sense. A habit so common we almost forget it, yet so steady that it becomes the very measure of our days. Even solitude is softened by tea. A student sits late at night, books spread across a desk, a mug beside them. A worker returns home tired and pours a cup before speaking to anyone. An elderly person, living alone, sets out a single cup, pours, and sips in silence, comforted by the familiar warmth. In each case, tea keeps company. It fills the silence with presence, makes loneliness gentler, study easier, work bearable, life a little steadier. Close your eyes now and imagine tea in your own daily rhythm. Perhaps it is morning, steam curling from your cup as you prepare for the day. Perhaps it is afternoon, the break that carries you through work. Perhaps it is evening when the house quiets and you sit, cup in hand, watching the world fade into night. Not these moments. Tea is not grand, not ceremonial, but deeply human. 8 is life as it is lived, moment by moment, sip by sip. Tea in daily life reminds us of its true power. It does not need celebration, nor stage, nor spotlight. It only needs a cup, hot water, and presence. In the end, the greatest beauty of tea may be this, that it makes the ordinary sacred, turning routine into ritual, turning habit into comfort, turning the simple act of drinking into an anchor for the soul. The story of tea is inseparable from travel. For centuries it moved with caravans, ships, trains, and travelers, reshaping the way people journeyed across the world. To drink tea while traveling was not only refreshment, but a way of carrying home, comfort, and culture into unfamiliar lands. Think first of the old caravan routes from China into Central Asia and Russia. For months, camels plodded through deserts and across mountains, carrying chests of compressed tea. At night, traders brewed it by campfires, sipping dark pu'er to warm themselves in the cold. Each cup was a reminder that even on the long road, one could pause, breathe, and feel human again. By the time the caravans reached Moscow, tea had become as much a part of the journey as the goods themselves. On the seas, tea filled the holds of ships that crisscrossed the oceans. In the 18th and 19th centuries, clipper ships raced from China to Europe with cargoes of tea, their speed measured in weeks, their competition fierce. Imagine sailors on deck after a long day, boiling water in battered kettles, sipping the very cargo they carried. For them, tea was warmth against the salt wind, a brief peace in the vast uncertainty of the sea. With the spread of trains in the 19th century, tea became a traveler's companion on land. Railway stations sold hot tea to passengers, and on long journeys, tea was often brewed in dining cars. In India, the cry of chai chai, garam chai, echoed along train platforms. Vendors carrying kettles and cups, pouring steaming chai for passengers through open windows. For many, that taste sweet, spiced, hot, became the flavor of travel itself. In Russia, the Trans-Siberian Railway carried samovars in its cars, ensuring that passengers could sip tea as the landscape of tundra and forest rolled endlessly past. By the 20th century, travel and tea were inseparable. In Britain, tea was served on steamships, in hotels, and on trains, as a sign of civility even far from home. In Japan, travelers carried boxed lunches called bento, always with bottles of tea included. In the Middle East, roadsides served mint tea to travelers resting their horses or cars. In Africa, bus stops often had vendors pouring black tea with milk into mugs for weary passengers. Tea was the pause in the journey, the ritual that made distance bearable. Even in modern travel, tea keeps its place. On airplanes, passengers are asked, coffee or tea? In train stations from Tokyo to London, kiosks sell bottles of chilled green tea or cups of black. On highways, travelers stop at sipping tea before continuing on. A cup of tea in travel is more than hydration as orientation, a way to feel grounded in motion, a moment of home in the midst of movement. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself traveling with tea. Perhaps you are on a train in India, the air thick with voices and movement. And a chaiwala hands you a clay cup through the window, its sweetness cutting the dust. Perhaps you are on the deck of a 19th century ship, wind in your face, sipping tea brewed in a battered pot. The sea endless around you. Perhaps you are in a Trans-Siberian carriage, samovar steaming, the click of wheels on rails steady beneath you, glass in hand. Or perhaps you are on a long drive, pulling into a roadside stop, sipping tea before continuing. In each case, tea carries you not just across distance, but into presence. Tea and travel remind us that even when we are far from home, we can carry home with us in a cup. It is a pause in the rush, a thread of continuity, a warmth that tells us we belong anywhere we choose to sit and sip. Wherever tea has traveled, it has carried with it a quiet but powerful meaning. Welcome. To offer someone tea is to extend not just a drink, but a gesture of care, of inclusion, of presence. Across continents, serving tea has become one of the most universal rituals of hospitality. a way for hosts to open their homes, their tables, and their hearts. Imagine stepping into a Moroccan home. Before words of greeting are finished, the host is already preparing mint tea. A silver tray gleams. A tall pot is filled with leaves, mint, and sugar. And when the glasses are poured from high above, foam rises in each one. Guests lift their cups, sip, and know instantly they are welcome. In Morocco, tea is not optional. It is the very language of hospitality, repeated day after day, guest after guest. In Russia, the samovar fulfills the same role. To visit a home is to be seated at the table, the urn steaming, glasses lined up. A little zavarka is poured from the small teapot, diluted with hot water, sweetened with sugar or jam. Guests sip, conversations flow, and time slows. Refusing tea would be unthinkable. The act of drinking together affirms community, warmth against the cold outside, continuity in a land where endurance has always mattered. South Asia, chai is the heartbeat of welcome. Guests are greeted with a boiling pot of milk, water, sugar, and tea leaves spiced with cardamom or ginger. The aroma fills the home, and cups are placed in hands before questions are asked. On village streets, a visitor is offered chai by strangers as naturally as by friends. In India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, to serve chai is to honor the guest, to fold them instantly into the family circle. In the Middle East, tea is as central as bread. In Egypt, small glasses of black tea, sometimes with mint, are offered in and homes alike. In Iran, tea is served on ornate trays, poured into tulip-shaped glasses, often accompanied by sweets. In desert tents, travelers are offered tea brewed with spices as the fire crackles, the act itself more important than the drink. To refuse would be to reject hospitality. To accept is to share in a timeless bond. Even in the West, tea has long carried this meaning. In England, to invite someone to come in for tea is to open one's home and heart. In America, sweet iced tea in the South is handed to guests on porches as a symbol of generosity. In Europe, tea is offered in kitchens and living rooms, always the first act of hosting. The phrase, "Shall I put the kettle on?" carries not just kindness but tradition, a promise that company will be cared for.
Hospitality through tea is not about luxury, it
Is about intention. Whether poured into porcelain cups, clay mugs, silver glasses, or enamel tins, the message is the same. You are seen, you are valued, you belong here. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself as a guest. You enter a home, perhaps in Moscow, perhaps in Delhi, perhaps in London. You are tired from travel, unsure of your place, and then the kettle whistles. The pot is brought out, a cup is set before you. The warmth spreads into your hands, the aroma rises, the first sip steadies you. In that moment, you are no longer stranger. You are welcomed. The ritual of offering tea, repeated in countless cultures, shows us the universal human desire to make others feel at home. It is not the drink itself, but the gesture, the act of pausing one's life to serve another, that matters most. Tea, in this way, has become not only a symbol of hospitality, but its purest expression. Tea has always carried more than taste. It carries time. A cup of tea is never only in the present, it is filled with memory. The aroma can recall childhood mornings. Sound of a kettle can bring back family kitchens. The warmth of the cup can remind us of moments of love, comfort, and belonging. Tea is not only a drink, but a vessel for memory, steeping the past into the present. For many, the first memory of tea comes from childhood. A grandmother pouring a small, milky cup, letting it cool before sliding it across the table. A parent brewing tea in the morning, the fragrance filling the house as the family wakes. Imagine yourself as a child, feet dangling from a chair, hands cupping a warm mug, feeling both grown up and comforted. That memory stays tied forever to the taste. Years later, when you sip the same blend, the years fall away, and you are back in that kitchen. The voices of families surrounding you. Tea also carries the memory of companionship. Friends gathering after school or work, sharing mugs while telling stories. Lovers meeting over tea, their conversations as much about the warmth between them as the liquid in their cups. Imagine sitting in a cafe where you once shared a pot with someone who shaped your life. The taste recalls not only the tea itself, but the laughter, the looks, the words spoken. Tea holds memory the way leaves hold fragrance quietly, waiting to be released. In times of hardship, tea too becomes memory. During wars, rations, or loss, a cup of tea often represented comfort against fear. Survivors remember tea as the one constant, the act of pouring and sipping a reminder that life could still hold gentleness. In families, stories are told of how a grandmother always put on the kettle after bad news, how tea anchored even grief. In this way, tea becomes not only tied to joy, but to resilience. Travel also gives tea its memories. A clay cup of chai on an Indian train platform, a glass of mint tea in a Moroccan market. A steaming mug in a Russian train carriage, a sweet iced tea on a southern Portugal become attached to place. Years later, to drink the same kind of tea is to feel yourself transported back, the memory as vivid as the taste. Tea, in this way, is a time machine of the senses. Close your eyes now and think of your own memories of tea. Perhaps the sound of your mother's kettle, the chipped mug you always reached for, the way your grandfather stirred his sugar with slow precision. Perhaps a friend who always brewed it just right, or a journey where tea was your comfort. Each memory is stored in the leaves, waiting to rise again with steam. Tea and memory remind us that life is made of small gestures. A cup placed before you, a sip taken in company, a pause shared in silence. These are not grand events, yet they remain with us, steeped deep into who we are. Tea, in its gentleness, holds memory as no other drink can. Every sip is both now and then, both present and past, both comfort and remembrance. Tea has always been tied to the turning of seasons. The leaf itself is born of nature's cycles, sprouting in spring, thriving in summer, maturing in autumn, and resting in winter. And for those who drink it, tea becomes a companion to the moods of each season, refreshing in heat, comforting in cold, reflective in the stillness between. To sip tea is to taste not only the leaf, but also the time of year it carries within it. In spring, tea is at its freshest. The first flush of leaves, pale and tender, are picked and prized. In China, Longjing green tea is harvested in early spring. It's flavored delicate, grassy, and sweet, carrying the energy of new growth. In Japan, Shinshetha, first new tea of the year, is celebrated, each sip embodying renewal. Imagine standing on a hillside in April, the air bright with blossoms, the first leaves plucked from the bushes. A pot is brewed, the liquid pale and green, tasting of sunlight and rain. To drink spring tea is to drink beginning itself, to feel the world waking. In summer, tea becomes refreshment. In hot climates, it is poured over ice, infused with lemon, mint, or fruit, a way to cool the body under fierce sun. In India, roadside stalls serve sweet, spiced chai even in the heat, the warmth paradoxically steadying the spirit. In Japan, bottles of chilled green tea are sold everywhere, slipped from vending machines into the hands of commuters. Imagine yourself on a humid afternoon, sweat on your skin, and you lift a glass of iced tea, condensation dripping down the side. The first sip cuts through the heat, sharp and sweet, making the air feel lighter. Summer tea is clarity, refreshment, a pause in the blaze of the day. Autumn brings a different mood. The air cools, the leaves turn, and with them, tea becomes reflection. In China, darker oolongs and pu'er are favored, their earthiness suited to the season. In Europe and America, spiced teas blended with cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg become symbols of harvest and gathering. Imagine a kitchen on an autumn evening, rain against the windows, a pot simmering with black tea, orange peel, and spice. The fragrance fills the air, and the sip is warm, grounding, thoughtful. Autumn tea is comfort and memory, a way of holding the fading light a little longer. And then comes winter, when tea is most deeply needed. In Russia, families gather around the samovar, glasses filled endlessly with hot, strong tea sweetened with jam. In England, mugs of strong black tea with milk-warm hands against frost. In Morocco, mint tea is poured, its sweetness cutting the chill. Imagine a snowstorm outside, wind howling against the house, and inside you wrap your hands around a steaming cup. The warmth spreads through you, the cold kept at bay. Winter tea is survival, presence, community in the season of stillness. Tea also follows its own agricultural seasons. The first flush in spring is prized for freshness, the second in summer for strength, the autumn harvest for depth, Farmers know each season in the leaf, each picking tied to climate, rain, and sun. To drink tea from each harvest is to taste the year's story, the wetness of spring, the brightness of summer, the ripeness of autumn, the rest of winter. Close your eyes now and imagine tea through the seasons. A pale, fresh cup in spring, filled with light. A cool glass in summer, cutting heat. A spiced brew in autumn, grounding and reflective. A strong, dark mug in winter, keeping cold away. Each season changes the leaf, changes the mood, changes the way we drink. Yet in all of them, tea is the same. A pause, a warmth, a companion through time's turning. Tea and seasons remind us that life, like tea, moves in cycles. Bitter, sweet, strong, delicate, tall, have their place. All are needed. And just as we sip different teas in different times, so too we live different rhythms in each season of our lives. Tea has always inspired poets. Its fragrance, its stillness, its way of gathering people and pausing time has found voice in verses across centuries. In poetry, tea becomes more than a leaf in water. It becomes an image of clarity, of quietness, of the delicate beauty of life itself. In China, tea and poetry grew together. During the Tang Dynasty, poets like Lu Tung wrote odes to tea, praising not only its taste, but the way it cleared the mind and lifted the spirit. In his famous 7 Bowls of Tea, he described how each cup brought a new sensation: lightness, refreshment, wisdom, and at last a sense of connection to the universe. Imagine him at his desk, brush in hand, steam curling upward, as he wrote of tea, carrying him from earth into the vastness of the sky. To these poets, tea was a muse, a metaphor for the fleeting beauty of existence. Japanese haiku poets, too, captured tea's essence in brief crystalline lines. Basho, the great master of haiku, often set his verses in the context of everyday life. In the act of drinking tea, so ordinary became the perfect image for simplicity and presence. A teacup in the garden, steam rising in winter. A guest lifting a bowl, such details became windows into the eternal found within the moment. The haiku's brevity mirrored the act of sipping. Small, simple, yet infinite in meaning. In the Islamic world, poets wrote of hospitality and conversation, and tea often appeared as symbol. Mint tea in the Maghrib, sweet and fragrant, became a metaphor for friendship, for generosity. For the sweetness of life shared, a glass of tea was compared to a jewel, to a moment of bliss, to the heart itself warmed by kindness. In Europe, tea entered poetry as domestic symbol. In the 18th and 19th centuries, English poets wrote of tea tables as places of conversation, of feminine grace, of civility. Later, Victorian writers used tea as shorthand for comfort against the hardness of industrial life. A steaming cup in a small home became an image of resilience, of modest beauty, of survival through care. Modern poets also find tea to be a companion to reflection. Quiet morning cup becomes a poem about solitude. Evening pot becomes a poem about memory. The act of steeping, of waiting, of sipping all lend themselves to contemplative verse. Some poets compare tea to time itself, steeping slowly, deepening in color and meaning as life does. Others see in tea a metaphor for relationships, the way leaves and water transform each other, the way warmth is shared between hands and lips. Close your eyes and imagine yourself as a poet with tea. The cup before you steams, the aroma rises, the world outside softens. You lift your pen and words begin to flow, not grand but small, like sips. You describe the curl of steam, the weight of the cup, the taste that lingers on your tongue. Each detail is enough. Each sip is a verse. Tea and poetry remind us that beauty is found not in grand gestures, but in ordinary acts. To drink tea is to pause, and in that pause, poetry appears. The cup, the leaf, the steam, the sip-all become lines in the poem of daily life. Tea has always been a companion to words, to conversation, to community. Yet equally, it has belonged to silence. From mountain monasteries to quiet gardens, from solitary mornings to evening pauses, tea is tied to stillness, the kind of silence that heals, that restores, that makes us whole again. In Buddhist monasteries, monks drank tea, not for chatter, but for meditation. A cup of tea after long hours of sitting was not noisy celebration, but quiet continuation of practice. Imagine a monk holding a small bowl in both hands, lifting it with care, sipping slowly. No words are spoken, but the silence itself is filled with presence, with awareness, with peace. The tea does not break the stillness, it deepens it. In Japan, the tea ceremony was shaped by silence. Guests and hosts spoke little, gestures replacing speech, each movement carrying meaning. The folding of cloth, the whisking of matcha, the passing of the bowl, these were not accompanied by chatter, but by stillness. Silence made the sound of water louder, the steam more visible, the moment more profound. Imagine kneeling in a small tea hut, listening to the faint hiss of the kettle. The world outside disappears. The silence, the tea, the breaths will become one. In Russia, families sat around samovars, sometimes talking, sometimes simply being. The long evenings of winter often passed in silence. Each person with their own thoughts, each glass of tea, a warm anchor in the quiet. In such settings, tea was not only a drink, but a way of holding silence together, making it gentle rather than heavy. In modern life, tea still offers this gift. Morning tea before the house wakes, evening tea after the noise of the day fades, a cup in solitude when the mind is too full. The kettle boils, the leaves steep, the cup is lifted. In those few minutes, silence takes shape. Tea becomes ritual not because of words, but because of their absence. Close your eyes and imagine yourself in silence with tea. The room is quiet, the only sound, the faint bubbling of water, the soft clink of cup against saucer. Steam rises, slow and unhurried. You sip, and in that sip the noise of the world falls away. There is no need to speak. The silence is not emptiness. It is fullness, presence, calm. Tea and silence remind us that not all connection needs words. Sometimes the deepest moments are those shared in quiet, where the cup itself speaks, where the warmth itself comforts. Ti teaches that silence is not absence, but a space where life can be most deeply felt. Tea has always carried a spiritual quality. Beyond refreshment, beyond routine, it has been a way of turning the simplest act into a sacred one. Across religions and traditions, tea has been woven into prayer, meditation, and spiritual practice, offering not only warmth for the body, but stillness for the soul. In Buddhist temples, tea was never just a drink. Monks sipped it during meditation, not only to stay awake, but also to remain grounded. The act of pouring tea became part of the discipline of mindfulness, each gesture precise. Imagine a monk lifting a teapot slowly, pouring into bowls with deliberate care, setting it down gently. The silence is unbroken, yet the act itself becomes prayer. In this way, tea is not separate from meditation but part of it, a ritual of awareness, a reminder that enlightenment lives in the ordinary. In Taoism, tea was seen as a drink of balance, harmony, and purity. The leaf represented nature itself, steeped into water to create unity of elements. To drink tea was to align body and spirit with the natural world. For Taoist sages, a cup of tea in the mountains was as sacred as a scripture. Both revealed truths, one in words, the other in taste. In Japan, the tea ceremony was shaped deeply by Zen philosophy, turning the serving of tea into a spiritual act. Chanawu was built on 4 principles: harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. Each of these was not only spoken but embodied in the making and sharing of tea. A tea hut was like a temple, the host like a priest, the bowl like an offering. Imagine kneeling on tatami mats, receiving a simple bowl of matcha with both hands. In that moment, the act is not casual, it is reverence, gratitude, presence. In Christian monasteries, tea also found a place. Monks who adopted it in Europe used it as a gentle stimulant for long hours of study and prayer. A pot on the table in a scriptorium was not indulgence but support, a quiet companion to devotion. The warmth of tea gave strength to continue chanting, writing, or meditating, keeping body and spirit aligned in service. In the Middle East, tea often accompanies religious gatherings as a symbol of hospitality and community. In Sufi circles, where poetry and music are shared in devotion, tea is poured as companions sing and meditate. The sweetness of mint tea in Morocco or black tea in Iran becomes part of the sacred atmosphere, a way of embodying generosity and presence with others. Even in modern spirituality, tea has become central. In mindfulness practices, tea meditation is often taught, holding the cup, feeling its warmth, breathing in its fragrance, tasting its flavor with full attention. To drink tea this way is to pray without words, to meditate without effort, to connect with the divine in the ordinary. Close your eyes now and imagine tea as spiritual practice. You lift the cup slowly, holding it with both hands. You breathe in its scent. Watch the steam rise. Take a slow sip. The warmth spreads through you. The moment expands. The noise of the world falls away. In that simple act, you find connection not only to the tea, but to something larger, to nature, to time, to stillness, to spirit. Tea and spirituality remind us that the sacred does not always need to be sought in distant places or grand rituals. Sometimes it is found in a humble cup, in a pause, in the rising steam. To drink tea with awareness is to touch the sacred in the ordinary, to find the divine in a leaf steeped in water. Tea has always been more than an individual experience. While one can drink it in solitude, the history of tea has largely been a history of community. It has gathered people in villages, in cities, in workplaces, in homes, around fires and tables. Wherever tea is poured, connection follows. In villages across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, tea has been the heart of gathering. Imagine a dusty street in an Indian town, a small chai stall at the corner. Workers, students, and travelers cluster around, holding steaming glasses. They share news, debate politics, exchange laughter. The tea itself costs little, but the community it creates is priceless. The stall is not only a business, but a circular place where differences blur as hands meet the same cup. In Morocco, community is expressed in the endless pouring of mint tea. Families, neighbors, and guests gather in courtyards, the tray of glasses traveling from hand to hand. The act of serving becomes a shared rhythm. The host pours, the guests accept, the conversations deepen. Here, tea is never hurried because community cannot be hurried. The longer the tea flows, the stronger the bonds grow. In Russia, the samovar stands as a symbol of collective life. On winter evenings, families sit around it, pouring glass after glass, conversations weaving across generations. The tea itself may be simple, but the act of drinking together sustains memory and connection. Even in cities, samovars once filled tea houses, where strangers became companions over shared warmth. In workplaces, tea has long built community in quieter ways. In Britain, the tea break became a shared pause where workers could step away from machines, laugh together, and feel human in the midst of labor. In modern offices worldwide, kettles and tea stations remain gathering points. Colleagues stand together, mugs in hand, conversations drifting from work to life. The cup in hand softens distance, bridges formality, and fosters camaraderie. In homes, tea binds families. Morning cups are shared at breakfast tables. Afternoon pots draw children and parents together. Evening mugs bring closure to the day. Even arguments pause when someone says, "Shall I make tea?" And in that moment, the drink becomes mediator, a way of saying, "Let us sit, let us be together." Close your eyes and imagine yourself in such a community. Perhaps you are at a street stall, laughter bubbling around you. Perhaps you are at a kitchen table, family gathered in warmth. Perhaps you are in an office chatting with colleagues over mugs. Or perhaps you are with strangers who, in the simple act of sharing tea, no longer feel like strangers at all. Tea and community remind us that belonging is not always grand. It is found in small acts, in cups passed around, in pauses shared. The leaf carries no hierarchy, no division. It simply says, "Come, sit, drink." And in that invitation, communities are built, sustained, and remembered. If tea creates community, it also creates something more personal, friendship. A cup of tea has so often been the beginning of conversations, the deepening of trust, the soft space in which companionship is born. Across the world, countless friendships have started with the words, "Shall we have some tea?" Imagine two students meeting for the first time. They sit awkwardly in a cafeteria or cafe, unsure of what to say. One orders tea, the other follows. As they wait for the cups to cool, conversation begins small at first, then deeper. By the time the cups are empty, something has shifted. They are no longer strangers. Tea has made the bridge. In households, tea is often the medium of friendship. Neighbors drop by and are immediately offered a pot. The host places cups on the table, and as the tea is poured, formality dissolves. The conversation becomes easier, warmer. By the time the pot is finished, the bond between them has grown stronger. This ritual repeats across streets and villages, turning acquaintances into companions. In South Asia, the roadside chai stall is as much a place of friendship as of refreshment. People stand shoulder to shoulder, sipping from small glasses, talking about life, politics, or dreams. In those short breaks, friendships are formed, renewed, strengthened. The chai itself is secondary to the connection it fosters. In England, having tea together became the standard language of social connection. Afternoon tea was not only about scones and porcelain, but about time given to another, the willingness to sit and share. To invite someone for tea was to invite them into one's life. Even today, to say "let us have a cup of tea" often means far more than drinking it, means opening the door to friendship. Close your eyes now and think of someone important in your life. Perhaps you can remember sitting together over tea, laughing, confiding, sharing silence. The cup between you was not just a drink, but a witness to the bond. Tea held the moment, making it tangible, helping the friendship grow. Tea and friendship remind us that companionship is not built in grand gestures, but in small, repeated acts of presence. A cup offered, a cup shared, a cup remembered. Across cultures, tea has been the quiet partner in countless friendships, helping people find each other, trust each other, and carry each other through time. If tea creates friendship and community, it weaves even more deeply within families. Across generations, tea has been a quiet thread that ties parents to children, grandparents to grandchildren, elders to the young. To brew tea in a family home is not only to prepare a drink, it is to continue a tradition, to pass down memory, to create a rhythm that endures. In many cultures, children first encounter tea through family rituals. A grandmother pours a weak, milky cup for a child, letting them sip slowly, feeling grown up yet cared for. A parent wakes early, boiling water and preparing tea for the household, the fragrance filling the air before the day begins. These small acts become the foundation of memory. Later in life, when the grown child prepares tea for themselves, the scent calls back those mornings, those hands that love. In Asia, tea is often at the heart of family gatherings. In China, major festivals such as Lunar New Year include tea offerings, where the younger generation serves elders as a sign of respect. Bowls are lifted with both hands, the active gesture of gratitude as much as nourishment. In Japan, families may practice the tea ceremony together, teaching children not only how to prepare matcha, but also how to embody respect, harmony, and humility. These lessons passed through tea are as important as words of guidance. In South Asia, chai is the daily bond of family. A pot bubbles on the stove, milk and sugar blending with leaves and spices, and the cups are shared among all present. Children grow up watching parents stir cardamom into the pot. Siblings wait for their cups. Grandparents sit with glasses in hand. The chai itself is simple, but the memory of family gathered around it is what gives it power. For many, the smell of boiling chai is the smell of home itself. In Europe, tea also shapes family rhythm. In Britain, tea time often means family time, whether in the afternoon with cakes and scones, or in the evening when the family sits down to talk. Even today, when schedules are busy, many families pause together for tea, using it as an anchor in the day. The act of pouring for one another, placing cups in front of loved ones, becomes an act of care. In Russia, the samovar embodies family unity. On long winter nights, families sit together, passing glasses around, refilling again and again. Stories are told, advice is given, silences are shared. The warmth of the tea and the glow of the samovar hold the family close, a circle of trust and belonging. Close your eyes now and think of your own family memories of tea. Perhaps it was a parent who always made a pot at the same time each day. Perhaps it was a grandparent who insisted you sit and drink before leaving the house. Perhaps it was the way your family gathered in the evening, each with their cup, each pausing for each other. These moments are not small. They are the very texture of family life, carried forward in each generation. Tea and family remind us that tradition is not always formal. Sometimes it is simply the repetition of small acts. Boiling, pouring, sipping, sharing. And in these acts, love is passed down, generation by generation, a warmth that endures long after the cups are empty. For many people, tea first enters life not as a sophisticated ritual or a cultivated taste, but as a gentle memory of childhood. The earliest encounters are often tied to family, to warmth, to care. Long before one understands the history of tea, the body remembers the feeling of a cup held in small hands, the aroma rising in familiar rooms, the voices of loved ones nearby. In some households, children were given tea as a mark of growing up. A grandmother might pour a weak, milky brew into a small cup, sweetened generously with sugar, letting the child sip while adults drank theirs stronger. The child feels included, sitting at the same table, holding the same kind of cup. The moment lingers, not for the taste, but for the feeling of belonging. Later, as adults, many recall that first sip as the beginning of tea's bond with them. In South Asia, children often grow up around the bubbling pot of chai. They watch their parents or grandparents add milk, sugar, and spices, the kitchen filling with fragrance. Sometimes they are given a spoonful of sweet, spiced tea, too little to keep them awake, but enough to feel part of the circle. The sound of boiling chai, the clink of glasses, it's the laughter of family. It all becomes a sensory memory carried into adulthood. In Britain and Europe, tea often marked childhood afternoons. A child might return from school to find a pot already on the table, biscuits waiting, the ritual comforting after a long day. Even if the child drank only warm milk or watered-down tea, the moment of sitting with family and sharing was what mattered. These scenes become woven into memory as symbols of security and rhythm. In Russia, children grew up around the samovar. They may not have drunk the strong tea themselves at first, but they were present at the table, watching parents and grandparents pour glass after glass, the warmth filling the room. Sometimes they were given sweetened tea with jam, sugar clinging to their lips, the memory of that taste forever tied to family evenings in winter. Childhood encounters with tea are rarely about flavor, they are about feeling. The warmth of the cup against cold fingers, the sound of adults talking, the sense of safety in a familiar space. To sip tea as a child is to feel loved, included, and cared for. Close your eyes now and recall your own childhood memories of tea. Perhaps the chipped cup you always used. It's the way your grandmother stirred sugar before passing it to you. The smell of steam rising in a busy kitchen, the laughter of siblings, the quiet presence of parents. Perhaps it was the comfort of being wrapped in a blanket, holding a warm cup on a winter's night. These memories live in the body as much as in the mind. Tea and childhood memories remind us that the bond with this drink begins not with knowledge but with love, long before we learn the differences between black and green, oolong and matcha. We know the difference between loneliness and warmth, and tea belongs to the latter. That is why, for so many, a cup of tea later in life can feel like returning home. Tea began as legend, few leaves drifting into hot water under the gaze of an ancient emperor, an accident that became medicine, ritual, and culture. From that moment in distant China, it traveled outward by caravan across deserts, by ship across oceans, by hand into homes. It became a symbol in empires, a comfort in villages, a companion in revolutions. It entered temples, palaces, kitchens, factories, and schools. Wherever it went, tea was never only a drink. It was always something more. Across this journey, we have seen tea as philosophy, as medicine, as art, as poetry, as silence, as community, as memory. It was poured into bowls in mountain monasteries, into glasses in Moroccan courtyards, into mugs on English tables, into gourds in South American plazas, into enamel cups by Australian campfires. In each place, the leaf was the same, yet the meaning was different. And in that difference lies its wonder. Tea belongs to everyone, everywhere. As people age, tea often becomes less about novelty and more about presence. A grandmother with her morning cup, A grandfather pouring slowly into his glass, the act steady, familiar, unhurried. For them, tea is not discovery, but anchor. It is ritual that has lasted across decades, a companion that has stayed constant while the world has shifted around them. Tea becomes memory and continuity, a reminder of all the mornings and evenings that have come before. And for the young, tea is still discovery. New flavors, new rituals, new ways of sharing. Bubble tea in bustling cities, iced tea at summer tables, green tea in mindful practice. Tea adapts, tea reinvents, tea survives. It bridges the old and the new, offering comfort to those who have known it all their lives and excitement to those who are just beginning. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself at the end of this long journey through history. A kettle whistles. A cup is poured. It might be porcelain, glass, clay, or enamel. The liquid might be pale green, deep black, sweet with mint, spiced with cardamom, red with hibiscus, or dark as earth. The details do not matter. What matters is the warmth in your hands, the pause it creates, the presence it brings. Tea teaches us that life is not made of grand events alone, but of small, repeated acts. Boiling water, steeping leaves, lifting a cup, sharing it with another, sitting in silence, talking through joy or sorrow, remembering, forgetting, beginning again. These are the gestures that shape a life. And so the story of tea is also the story of us. It is a story of journeys, of connections, of comfort and hardship and celebration and peace. From the first sip in legend to the last sip of the evening, tea reminds us of something essential, that in the rush of the world, there is always time to pause. There is always space to sit. There's always warmth to be found, in a leaf, in water, in presence. As this story closes, the cup remains, waiting full, ready to be lifted, ready to be shared. The journey of tea continues every time you choose to drink it, every time you pause, every time you sit with yourself or with another. Take a sip now. It'll the warmth spread. The story does not end, it lives in you. Take a slow breath in, and now let it go. Allow your body to settle into stillness. The day is ending, and this is your time. Nothing else is needed. Nothing else is urgent. It's only this moment. Now, imagine a small, quiet room. The air is cool, but inside, it is warm. On a low wooden table, a teapot rests. Steam curls from its spout, rising gently, fading into the calm air. You sit in silence. You hear only the soft hiss of water still warm, the faint crackle of the fire nearby. The light is low, soft golden shadows dancing on the walls. The teapot waits for you. Beside it, a single cup. Simple, unadorned, yet perfect in its place. You lift the pot slowly. You hear the gentle sound of liquid pouring, a stream of amber, steady, clear. It fills the cup, and steam rises to meet your face, warm and soothing. Set the pot down. Wrap your hands around the cup. Feel its warmth seeping into your fingers, into your palms, into your very being. Breathe in. The fragrance is earth, sweet, comforting. It carries memories, moments, centuries. It carries stillness. Bring the cup to your lips. Take a slow sip. The taste spreads gently across your tongue, warm down your throat, soft in your chest. You place the cup down, and you breathe. In this space, nothing hurries. The tea does not rush. The silence does not press. Everything is unhurried, timeless. You take another sip, and with it, you feel your shoulders soften, your jaw release, your breath deepen. The warmth spreads from chest to arms to legs to toes. Each sip carries you further into rest. You close your eyes. The cup is still there, warm beside you, but you no longer need to lift it. The comfort it gave is now within you. Your body is heavy, your thoughts are light, the steam rises and fades. The fire hums softly. The silence deepens around you. Now imagine you are no longer in the room, but in a vast, quiet garden at night. The stars are above, countless and steady. The air is cool, but inside you, warmth remains. The tea is still with you, flowing through your body, bringing calm. With every breath, you sink deeper. With every beat of your heart, you grow heavier, more at ease. The garden holds you. The night protects you. The tea soothes you. Allow yourself to drift. If thoughts come, let them pass like clouds. If memories arise, let them fade like steam. If feelings stir, let them soften like leaves unfurling in water. All you need is here. The cup is empty now, but you are full of its calm. The journey is complete. Rest now. Let your breath be slow, your body loose, your mind quiet. You are safe. You are home. You are held in stillness. Sleep comes gently, like steam rising and fading, like leaves settling to the bottom of a pot, like night itself unfolding. Rest now, rest deeply. Rest in the warmth of tea, in the silence of night, in the embrace of calm.